Hello and welcome to a video about armor in Kingdom Death. My name's Fen, and this video came about because a while ago somebody put in the comments on my Patreon, I can't remember which, they requested that I do a video about all of the armor sets in Kingdom Death. And we're post-holiday season here, snow is falling down outside, there's a storm coming, and I was like, I know, I could just do like a tier list. I could tier list all of the armor sets. When I started looking at that and doing it, I was like, well, I could, and people like top 10 lists, people like tier lists, it's just good, easy engagement. But it didn't feel right. And I was finding there were so many things I wanted to talk about that, well, here we are, in a presentation about armor in Kingdom Death instead. I am going to get to what I think are currently for me the best armor sets in Kingdom Death, but we're going to take a bit of a long journey. I'm resigned to this, just never doing short videos, no matter how much I want to. Just not me, I guess. So here we are. We're going to begin with our basic starting principles, just so we're all on the same foundation and you understand my thinking, so you can be like, well, I agree with that, I don't agree with that, so you know the benefits and drawbacks of my particular way of looking at this. So, armor is really important because it provides soak. All survivors have a little bit of natural soak. This is our injury boxes, light and heavy injuries, and then once those are gone, we start taking severe injuries. Monsters deal damage. The higher the node and the higher the level of the monster, the more damage they deal, and they just deal the damage. They don't have to wound the way that survivors have to wound. They just get to deal it. So soak is very important. Prevents severe injuries. Preventing severe injuries helps prevent death. The other thing very important about armor is typically it's 5 entire pieces of gear to cover 5 locations. That means we've got a 9-slot gear grid, and over half of it is going to armor. So it is very, very important. We need to pick our armor sets to support what we're looking to do with our survivor, as well as protect them. On top of that, armor, when you get a complete set, generates this bonus card, this armor set card. It's effectively a gear card, but it doesn't go into your grid. It just sits out on the side, and it gives you 1, sometimes 2, possibly even 3 bonuses. That's kind of insanely good, and it's so much value that's why not only is armor important, but armor sets are what we really, really care about. That means every build, or almost every build, cares about armor and needs to select the right armor for their job. It also means if you've got a survivor who, because they have crystal skin, or they have marrowism, or something else that means they do not need armor because they get their armor points or protection elsewhere, we get really excited about that, because without armor, as I've written here, we get to put more items into our gear grid, and items are the really busted thing in Kingdom Death, because items just scale constantly. They don't need to be replaced the way that weapons and armor do. They just constantly are every bit as good as they've ever been, and they break the rules in so many important and fundamental ways. So, that's why armor is important. That's why not having armor is amazing if you can get away with it. And let's go into the scoring system. So, we're going to score on a bunch of different facets. So, I'm going to look at 8 scoring categories, 9 categories in total, and rate the armor set based on those. I'm going to be comparing each armor set roughly within its era. Kingdom Death has 4 eras: early game, mid game, late game, and end game. End game came about because the campaigns got changed and expanded to 30 years, and this post mini boss, mid game boss, core boss game came about. So we now have 4 eras. Node 4 armor sets also necessitated this 4th era. I'm not happy about it. It's just the way it is. And we're probably going to have a 5th era when the Ivory Dragon lands, and I don't know what we're going to call that at all. Post, I don't know, the post-endgame era, we'll get there, whatever. In respect to the score, 0 is either going to be this is terrible and just should be redesigned, which I don't think anything will get a 0 on that front, or it just doesn't have this aspect and it's not getting any points for it. Each of these aspects I consider to be important. Scoring a 0 if it doesn't do those. 10 is reserved for the very best in a category, or incredibly unique or hard to get abilities that you're not going to get anywhere else. So that's always something to keep an eye out. Individual armor pieces can have really strong abilities that necessitate or ask you to run the armor set for a lot longer than you normally would. We'll get to an example of that very quickly. However, given that I've sliced the 10 and the 0 off, most armor scores are going to be between 1 and 9 for each category, and then I'll add them all together and that will be the final grade for that particular armor. And as I said, you should compare it to its peers. I will categorize everything into eras at the end, but if you want another version of what the first 3 eras are, they're effectively Rawhide, Leather and Lantern, the generic ones. Our max score is 80, nothing should get it. Our minimum score is 0, absolutely nothing should get it. That would just be 5 blank cards that are forced into your gear grid for absolutely no reason. Also, I'm not going to be rating the the King's Armor, the Kingsman Armor, the Cursed Regal Armor set, because it doesn't have a set bonus. And it's not really something you can do interesting stuff with for the most part. So it's not on this list. Maybe I'll talk about it when I eventually have to talk about the Kingsman, but not in this. Okay, let's get on to the categories. Here we are. First one is roles. This is a non-scoring category. I'm just going to be listing what roles it can perform. The more roles, the better. And an armor set doesn't necessarily perform the same roles throughout its lifespan. Some armor sets will start off being a frontline set and then they will gradually be passed on to further and further away from the front line, because you want your best armor on the person taking all the damage. Speaking of which, second category and the first scoring category is protection. We'll be looking at armor points, evasion, block, deflect, insanity gains, all the kind of stuff that stops your survivor from dying. Protection is very important. The type of protection and how important it is depends on the role your armor set is performing. If it's on a tank, evasion, very, very important. If it's on an archer or even like a longer range or skirmishing style damage dealer, evasion less important, but armor points perhaps more important due to how reactions tend to work. Next one, affinities. So how many affinities it provides, what breakpoints they reach per colour, I'll talk about that a bit later, and how easily it activates its own abilities. A armor set that has abilities that require puzzle or affinities and activates them is fine, it's great, although it does have some limitations in how you can lay it out in order to keep those abilities active. But an armor set that doesn't activate its own abilities is not so great, because it is putting constraints and limitations on what other pieces of gear we can put in our gear grid. We'll see some examples of that as we go further on of every single type. So affinities is not just the sheer number and colour of them. There's a whole bunch of other things which I'm thinking about. It's kind of almost vibes based. I don't have a science, apart from the important breakpoints. Layout. Touched on that a little bit, but the more flexibility you have in your layout that you can put the armour pieces in, the better. Puzzle affinities on an armour set constrain the layout a lot, because you are being asked to pay for an ability and not use it if you don't activate the puzzle affinities, which isn't great unless the puzzle ability is really, really minor and just kind of a little extra bonus. There's not many like that. Our fourth scoring category is survival. So survival is what we use to activate survival actions. Survival actions are how we break the parity between us and the monster. They're the big advantage that we have. We get to ignore hits, we get to deal extra hits, we get to run around the place faster. This is one of the strongest tools a survivor has, so survival really matters. It's its own category, and the key thing in this is an armor set that generates you survival that's worth a lot. It is less pressure on your items, on your innovations to pick up the slack. Now, when you get to the late portion of a settlement lifespan, usually you have enough departing survival that it isn't as important for every survivor to have survival on their armor sets. But if an armor set doesn't produce survival, it's getting a 0 unless it has abilities that effectively reduce the amount of survival you need to spend on that survivor. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Our other categories are abilities. Abilities do a whole wide range of different things. They can be automatic, which means you always get them. They can be affinity, which means you need certain numbers of affinities on your gear grid, or they can be puzzle affinity, where you have to have those affinities connected. So the different types, automatic abilities are just better than any kind of affinity ability because there's no effort to get them, but also the power of the abilities does matter. Then we have synergies. It's always good to have synergies. The more synergies an armor set has, so the more things it can combine with and generate a bigger benefit, the better. Forced synergies, on the other hand, are where an armor set says, I want you to have this gear, or I want you to do this. Those, they vary. As long as it isn't the only way you can play, so it isn't a limitation, that's fine. It's a positive. If the synergy is optional, that's great. We'll see examples of those, of course. Then we have lifespan. So how long you can use an armor set once it's crafted is a huge part of how good an armor set is. An armor set that, say, I don't know, just a random example, it's not like there's an armor set that is like this. An armor set you could craft in Lantern Year 1 for, say, I don't know, 5 hide, and then you could still use it in Lantern Year 30 on your support survivor while fighting the Gold Smoke Knight, for example. That would be a really good lifespan. That would be a bonkers crazy good lifespan because we've got such a good return on investment. Now, when it comes to lifespan, we expect our Era 1, our first sort of collection of Node 1 and Node 2 armor sets to fade off somewhere around the mid-game and not really be good enough for the job anymore, as the mid-game Node 3 armor sets start to take over. That's expected. That should be happening. That's just progression. That's fine. We shouldn't expect an armor set to be starting to sunset, that is running out of its lifespan, at the very moment or close to the moment you craft it. That would be a bad lifespan and bad investment. So that's something I'll be thinking about, is how long do I typically on average manage to use a given armor set? And being able to pass an armor set from tank to damage dealer to support does a lot to improve the lifespan, so a flexible armor set or one with good abilities, etc. can just last longer. Then our final category is cost. So there's no maths behind this. It's a combination of how many endeavours, how many resources, the total, the quality of them, the rarity of gathering the resources, any other requirements in crafting. All of that comes together to sort of give the cost total. Again, it's kind of, I don't know, vibes-ish. But lower cost means it's easier to craft, it's more efficient. And there we are, that gives us our maximum possible points, which, as I said, would be utterly broken and ridiculous, and you would be crafting it in Lantern Year 1 and it would just dominate the game and you'd never want to make anything else. We don't want to see that. No. Although, you know those Marrowism survivors I mentioned before? Technically, I would score them at an 80 because they're so good, but they don't have an armor set and they're scoring so high because they got all those slots for items. So, just a nice aside. Now, before we get on to scoring everything, a couple more bits and pieces. Affinity breakpoints. These are the 6 pieces of gear that I am primarily thinking about with affinity breakpoints. There's actually lots and lots of breakpoints for gear. It changes, affinity breakpoints, it changes when you are looking at the armor sets, the monsters and everything, but these are always available, so these are like our defaults we can think about. What matters is, does the armor set provide 100% of these affinities already, or does it provide almost all of them, and it connects to the item to finish it off, or how many extra does it need. So on the top section here, we've got our Monster Tooth Necklace, for example. So if an armor set has 2 red, fantastic. That's +2 strength. That 2 red is great. I like 2 red on an armor set. If it has 1.5 red, and the last red faces to the left, so it connects to the Monster Tooth Necklace, again, that's almost as good. So it's getting the same score. Same with Lucky Charm, Monster Grease. We'll see examples of these. There's armor sets that reach these breakpoints really well or get halfway there. They're all great. On the bottom row, we have our charms from the Barber Surgeon. Worth noting, the only one I highly rate is the blue charm. That is a generically good ability. The red charm is kind of a meme. 50% chance of wounding is not good. It's not what you want. You don't want to be flipping a coin each time you're stabbing the monster. If this wounded on 60% of the time, we'd be talking about actual proper builds with it. Instead, it's just kind of, if you want to have some fun with the red charm, or it's cheaper to get a red charm and just use a bone dagger, you know, you do you. Green charm, this has become a little bit more valuable over time because there are some pattern recipes that call for inexplicable survival. On the whole, though, I don't massively rate the green charm as a required breakpoint, with the exception of one build. There is a build, an armor set, that really likes the green charm, and we'll take a look at that when we get there. But I just wanted to hold those 3 on the bottom, because otherwise I was just going to put the blue charm there by itself, and that just didn't seem right. But yeah, so the big important things I look for are, can it do 2 red? Can it do 2 blue? Can it do 3 green? Can it do 4 blue? So I can slip a blue charm on there, and suddenly I can synergize that with spears or with high speed, you know, all sorts of different things. So, next thing, hit locations. So, this is one, there's a lot of text on this slide because this is one of those ones I put in after walking Pam, our dog, and I realized I did need to talk about this, and I wanted to talk about this. So, every survivor has 5 hit locations. You've got head, arms, body, waist, and legs. That means we've got 5 locations to cover. But, because of the hit location dice, monsters actually hit in 6 different locations. They are, as you can see represented, head, arms, body 1, body 2, waist, and legs. This means the body is a 1 in 3 to get hit, everything else is a 1 in 6. So, what we want from our armor is ideally double the number of armor points on the body as anywhere else, or at least hopefully some extra points on the body. Armor design doesn't take this into account. Armor design in Kingdom Death is generally, let's put all the same armor points onto every single location. I actually think that's not particularly great as far as design goes. I would like to challenge the design team to start thinking about these hit location percentages and adjusting the armor sets accordingly. The other locations to think about, we have the head. So the head has half the soak of everything else. Naturally, it's only got 1 point. And additionally, a 1, 2, 3 and a 4 kills you as opposed to a 1 and 2. And we have some monsters that headhunt. So additional points on the head matter. Less points on the head is also a concern. So finally, legs. You only die on a 1. You take extra bleeding on a 2. So legs, you could have less armor on the legs in most cases, and I would actually be absolutely fine with that. Now, when it comes to actually playing, because all the armor sets are designed to this very, or almost all the armor sets are designed to this very generic, same number across the board, we, the players, compensate for this via survival actions and items, and activations. So dodge, block, deflect, and similar. But I do think that the armor system can be refined and improved further by putting more armor points on the head, more armor points on the body, and less armor points on the legs. So that's just something I wanted to highlight. It's also something you want to think about when you're crafting an armor set. Make the body piece first, make the head piece second, make the waist, waist and hands, technically you make them at the same time. It's worth noting that for the very first step to Rawhide, you actually make the waist last, but that's because the Rawhide waist is first of all rubbish, and secondly, you have a cloth to cover that spot. But anyway, in general terms, body, head, and then arms and waist, and then last of all, do the legs. Okay. We now have a little armor set that is the armor set that doesn't have any gear. It is, in my opinion, the most significant, important, and delightful armor set the entire game has. It is the armor set that I would recommend everybody house rules into their games. It is your boy, the incredibly satisfied, wonderful man of Clothed and Satiated. First of all, look at that art. I love this art so much. This guy, give me a model of this guy. Love him. What this armor set is, as you can see, I've given the front and back, is it comes in the Gambler's Chest. It's Arc Survivors only, that's what the little icon means. And once it's unlocked via the Collective Cognition system, we'll go into it here, but anyway, once it's unlocked, you gain the Clothed and Satiated step bonus when you depart wearing at least 3 pieces of armor, and you don't qualify for another armor set bonus. This has had 2 impacts on the game. First of all, we no longer need to rush to try and complete an armor set above any other armor at high speed. So it's softened the blow where the traditional progression is make a set of Rawhide as fast as possible, ignore everything else to do with armor until that's done. Now we can actually look at other armor sets along the same time and be like, hey, well, I got 3 pieces of Rawhide, they're the ones that matter, that's nice. I got head, body, arms, and we got the cloth for waist, so cool. And we can also just now work on a Node 1 armor set that I really want. So that is huge. The second thing is this has enabled mixed sets to work. So mixed sets are where you take individual pieces of gear from different armor sets and you put them together for the ability synergies. The problem we had before is this kind of just screwed you over on armor points. And that mattered, so mixed sets were not used particularly often, except sometimes when leveling up or when doing really specifically broken builds. But we won't have any in this video, but sometime I'll end up talking about the most classic mixed set build that we have. But anyway, having this +1 armor to all hit locations is the tipping point that made mixed sets viable. And as a consequence, I could not talk about armor in a video without mentioning what I think is the best armor set bonus, which is Clothed and Satiated. I love this so much that I think that maybe you should just introduce it to every campaign. Just have it be allowed from Lantern year, I don't know, 2 or 3, I haven't worked out the exact balance yet, but regardless whether you got Arc Survivors or not, I would recommend allowing this to be a part of the campaign, maybe as a reward for beating the Butcher or something. It's, you don't want it from very first Lantern year, that's not how it's balanced to design with Arc Survivors, but yeah, regardless, Clothed and Satiated, really, really, really good. I love it a great deal. So here we are, our first actual armor set. I've just reappropriated my layout template that I have all of the armor sets on. I'm gonna put all of these individual images onto the post on my Patreon that these come out on, so you can grab them if you want to make use of them. When it comes to the actual layouts, I've just put them in a typical layout that I generally use them in, unless there is only a very restricted particular layout that they go into. So be aware, I'm not necessarily saying this is the only layout you must put them in. It's just, this is the layout I've chosen to display them with. Other layout options are available. Okay, so as we can see with Rawhide, all the pieces provide 1 piece of armor. We've got a blue affinity, we've got a red affinity, we've got a puzzle ability to gain +1 evasion, we've got a puzzle ability to gain AI manipulation, which is incredibly rare. We've had very few extra options for that. We've got 2 survival on departure, we've got an extra armor point to all locations for a set bonus, and we've got this incredible Whenever you perform a survival action, you roll 1d10 on a result of 6+, gain +1 survival. And its absolute worst flaw, this is like plus 50% survival. Generally though, it's plus 100% survival. So you can think of it as being anywhere between there depending on how optimistic or pessimistic you are. If you're Mr. Super Optimism, hey, infinite survival, technically possible, and sometimes it can actually work out like that with the right supporting things. So, getting ourselves onto our assessment. Rawhide Armor is a flexible role armor set. It is the first tanking set you use. Then when your tank has a new armor set, you hand Rawhide to a damage dealer, and they use that survival to surge and attack. And then when your damage dealers have nice shiny new armor sets, this well worn in pair of shoes known as Rawhide Armor goes to your support survivor, or your archer, your ranged survivor, or your like leftover flex survivor. Essentially, it can be used anywhere. It does fall off of tanking once you start moving to node 1 level 2 and node 2 level 2 and of course node 3 level 1. You start needing to have something more durable to keep up with the monster damage, but you know, otherwise it can do anything. Protection, I'm giving it 4. It's only 10 armor points total. There is the refunds on dodging and surge, so that helps with protection as well, and there is the +1 evasion, so it's not terrible, but it isn't like this isn't the best in class for just pure protection. Layout, 4 points. It's somewhat flexible because you've got a forced L shape and then you've got 2 ones that you can put wherever you like. But those 2 ones don't really help at all with any other kind of pieces of armor. They just not any other kinds of pieces of gear, so they just kind of sit there in your gear grid, taking up space. And in particular, the waist, as I mentioned, is a rubbish item. So it really is just occupying space to provide armor points. Affinities are 5. It's halfway towards Monster Tooth Necklace being active. It's halfway towards Lucky Charm being active. That is very useful because it turns out it's really easy to get a Lucky Charm crafted in the first couple of years and get 2 blue affinities and start farming away. You know, effectively, Lucky Charm plus Fecal Salve is 2 organs, and then you know that's 2 slots, 2 organs, job done with Rawhide and a deadly weapon. You're good to trot. Fantastic. Survival, full marks. The set bonus is best in class. There is so much potential survival in this armor set, and it keeps scaling. The more survival you have for your survival limit, the more survival this armor set provides. That's why it keeps going and going and going for so long. On abilities, again a 10. It is best in class because of this AI control manipulation. We are starting to get AI scouting. The Frogdoggles from the Frogdog do that. But we still don't have much in the way of AI manipulation. And you will find some armor sets that go, hey, I can use the Rawhide headband on this armor set. And that makes the armor set better, which tells you how important the Rawhide headband ability can be. And not just for learning. Later on, when you start facing more dangerous monsters, the Rawhide headband ability to let you set up the legendary AI cards to be removed as wounds actually matters a lot. Cutting the legendaries off level 3s really hampers the worst of what they're doing. So the Rawhide headband never becomes irrelevant no matter on your skill level because of how it works. You can get away with hit location control, like ignoring it after a while, because you get used to how to play against the monster and you internalize the general rules, so you don't worry so much about what you're hitting into. But that never happens with AI. So this is like a 10 out of 10 ability. Just really good. Synergies, I've given it 4. A bit of synergy with deadly weapons. That's kind of it, really. Little bit of synergy with monster grease, but it doesn't have the affinities to go really crazy with it. Yeah. So, you know, fine. Lifespan, Of course, as you knew when I was talking about that armor set that you can use from Lantern Year 1 to Lantern Year 30, I was talking about Rawhide Armor. I've done it. It's been great. You do need to support it with extra armor points via a shield as you get further into the campaign, but it is so good at what it does with that survival bonus and that set bonus that you're happy to pay the price to get there. Cost 10 out of 10. 5 hide, full armor set, 10 armor points for 5 hide, 2 armor points per hide, and all the abilities we're getting on top of it. Like, if it was just 5 hide for 10 armor points and it had no affinities and it had no set bonuses, I'd still be scoring it quite highly. But you know, this is better than that. So 10 there, which gives us that final score of 57, is really good. This is a as it turns out to be a high score, 57. Not the highest, but high score. So this is the benchmark for our first era, our early game, aka the Rawhide era. So quite a high bar to pass. We're now going to look at our next generic. That's Leather Armor. So Leather Armor is our second era benchmark. This is, I think, a bit more of a well-designed armor set in respect to Rawhide, because it doesn't crowd out Node 3 armor sets at all. It helps you get them and then works alongside them. It does, however, completely crowd out almost all Node 2 armor sets and most of Node 1 armor sets. Between Rawhide and Leather Armor, many of the other armor sets that you'll get from monsters we just don't care about because these are just doing such good jobs. So Leather Armor, as you can see, has an awkward layout. You've got a pair at the bottom. That can be any row, and you really want to put monster grease into the third slot on that line. So you have a line of 3, you have a pairing of 2, and then you have the leather skirt, which often pairs with a leather shield. So this is generally a pseudo 7 slot armor set, but it's not forced. You can ignore those if you're using the armor set for other things. It doesn't have amazing affinities beyond the green because the red and the blue affinities are awkward. It's very hard to combine them with Monster Tooth Necklace or Lucky Charm unless you're willing to let go of the green bonus. So that does have some awkwardness. That said, this is a great tank or off-tank set. It's my preferred choice for mid-game bruisers. So bruisers are like frontline survivors who deal damage and can take a lot of damage. Giving it a 7 for protection. It's got 20 armor points. It's got bash protection. It gives you insanity when you depart. This is just all really good abilities here. Even the leather boots, that little move one space, has some protection based assistances, because repositioning after your turn can be very helpful and useful to allow you to dash cancel, because that little bit more distance, that one extra space, might put you out of range of a monster. Layout itself, as I said, there's some awkwardness to it, but you are not completely forced into any particular layout. You can break it apart, so I'm giving it a 6. It's got a lot of affinities. It can contribute to various other things as well, so the layout's quite flexible. Affinities 7. It's got that great, amazing green affinity setup for combining with shield monster grease. Phenomenally good, just a baked in affinity synergy. Really, really good. Survival 6 points, gives you 2 survival when you're departing. That's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Synergies 7, mostly because of the monster grease and leather shield synergy, but also it has very good Zanbato synergy. This is a great set to put a Zanbato on, and just being so generically good really does help it a lot. That bash immunity it does do things for certain survivor playstyles. which bleeds into abilities. I've given it a 6. I like the boots movement. I think it's great. I also really like having immunity to bash. That's fantastic. So 6 on abilities. On another day I might score this a point lower, maybe, but you know, whatever. Synergies, giving it a 7. It's got some of the best synergies in the game regards to mid-game. As I said, Zambato, if you get one of those, amazing weapon. And of course, Monster Grease. Lifespan, an 8. This lasts a long time. Once your front line tanking or off tanking survivor is done with this, because they got something else, this is easily passed on to another survivor. And as we're going to see in a second, there's other things you can do to improve its lifespan, because its leather armor isn't just leather armor. Cost, this is 9 resources and an endeavor. One of the resources is even a scrap, which we don't care about so much at the time we're making leather, so it's very cheap. And because of how leather works, where it's 1 endeavor to convert any number of hide, that can be hyper efficient. So I've given it an 8. I think this is really well costed, just like Rawhide. And the final score is a 54. This is a lot more reasonable of a score, and I think that shows leather armor doesn't crowd out the mid-game armor sets as much as Rawhide crowds out the early game armor sets. Okay, before we get onto Lantern Armor, a very quick stop off at this variant armor set for leather. Vagabond Armor comes with Before and Beyond the Wall, which are Aya sets. This represents Aya's armor set that she wears for a lot of her story. It is a leather armor variant, and it has a variation in how it can be constructed itself. You can either have the leather boots or you can have the cloth leggings, and the cloth leggings are a fair bit cheaper to construct, so you can get this armor set online a lot earlier and then upgrade it further a bit more down the line. And the cloth leggings never stop being completely irrelevant, because they actually cause the leg location to bleed less, and the price of the leg location being less likely to kill you is that it bleeds you a lot more and a lot faster. So this accessory is fairly relevant even if you're not using it anymore. You notice as well though, this doesn't have a headgear, which is actually a big bonus when you think about flexibility for using this armor set, because as we mentioned, we've got a piece of headgear we like to carry as long as possible. So this can be a carrying platform for the Rawhide headband, although the affinities are not ideal for that. The other thing to note about this, you need cloth. Cloth is a very finite resource, and more things in Kingdom Death ask us to use it. So depending on your campaign mix and what expansions you have and what various different monsters you're using, you might not be able to afford to craft the cloth leggings. That could increase the cost of this armor set. Another thing to note, the tabard ability, you get +1 insanity if you're encouraged when in a barbaric settlement. We don't do barbaric settlements, they're rubbish. And I mean that. I mean, barbaric is just currently a terrible choice. But we get +1 survival when encouraged if our settlement is romantic, which means you can encourage a vagabond survivor and they get encouraged and they get the affinity, they get the survival that you've used, which is just amazingly good. So onto the scoring. Protection is lower at a 6. Layout is a little bit higher. On the whole, the key things here are these abilities and synergies and the cost. Because it's cheaper to build along the way, because you can get it running with the leggings, it's really cost effective. But the biggest thing is something I haven't talked about yet, and we're going to go back and take a look at that. It's the set bonus, which is you get the benefits of sword mastery and sword specialization. The settlement doesn't get the innovation, nobody else gets the benefit. So this means if you want to be using swords, this is the best mid-game sword armor set you can possibly think of. It is incredibly good because it gives you all the benefits of being a sword master and a sword specialist while you're training to become them. And also, the Black Sword in the Gorm expansion goes to 30 strength if you have Sword Mastery. We're pretty sure that's intended because Aya's model in one of the two sets is carrying a black sword. So if you want to make the game a bit of a pub stomp, you can craft a black sword and Vagabond Armor, and you have one survivor who wounds everything on a 2+. So that's another thing to point out, and that's why I can't score this abilities or synergies anything less than 10s. This is insanely good. It gives us a final score of 64, which if we go back to the leather armor, we can see is 10 points higher. This is an incredibly powerful armor set, and with us having regalism survivors who like to use sword and board, this set has just continued to get better and better. You don't need to own both before and after the wall, before and beyond the wall. Take a look at the contents. You only need the one with the tabard and the set bonus to be able to use this armor set. I do recommend buying that expansion. Even if you're not cheesing it with the black sword, this is a very good armor set that I like a lot. Okay, we got one more generic armor set to talk about, and its variants. That is Blacksmith's Lantern Armor. This is your premium late game tanking set. This is the premium club set. Its abilities include a reduction in movement of -2, a potential increase in movement if you get the Lantern Greaves active, extra armor points on all locations with metal armor, which is all of these locations, so it has 8 armor points to each location. Clubs get +2 accuracy, and they have sharp, and on arrival you gain survival up to the settlement limit. This also has a bunch of affinities. It is already active for the Lucky Charm, which does matter. There is a club that's deadly. It's the Riot Mace in the Gorm expansion. And also it has these red affinities for synergy with the Monster Tooth Necklace. You can easily put a Monster Tooth Necklace and a Bone Club into the bottom 2 slots, and boom, you've got your extra movement back. You've got a really good weapon for hitting the monster with, and it's got tons and tons of strength because you've got 7 strength base thanks to the +2 on the Monster Tooth Necklace, and you've got sharp on it. Phenomenally good. Its roles are either tank or off tank. It can eventually become a club damage dealer if the campaign goes into sort of end game territory and this armor set stops being the best for pure tanking roles. I've given it an 8 for protection. It's got loads of armor points. It struggles a little bit with monster grease, but it can get there. And it also has earplugs, which makes you deaf at the cost of -1 accuracy. That's partially offset by the Lantern Gauntlets bonus as long as you're using clubs. You should really only be using clubs with Lantern Armor. And no matter what the models try and tell you, like Vermin Queen, who has twin daggers, you don't want twin daggers with Lantern Armor. You want a club. Layout, giving it a 2. This is a really, really awkward layout. Really awkward. And that is unfortunate, to say the least. You have to break the armor set's armor point bonus, set bonus, in order to change this cross layout at all. Affinities are 5, as I mentioned. It covers a few breakpoints, but it generally needs assistance to get further. Survival, 9 out of 10. You're going all the way up to max survival. The reason I'm not giving it a 10 is you do lose access to the being encouraged. That has almost fallen off if you're playing people with the Dreamkeeper because you can fist pump instead. Abilities, a solid 7. They're all focused around club, really, but they're great. Synergies, again a 7, but it's almost all clubs. And lifespan 9, as I mentioned. I expect the late game and end game armor sets to be scoring a 9 or a 10 because they are being used for the rest of the campaign. Our big drawback here is the cost. This is a stupidly expensive armor set. It is a lot of work to get the blacksmith open. You need to get to scrap smelting and then use scrap smelting to open the blacksmith, and then you need to gather all the iron and craft this, and it needs a lot of iron and it needs a lot of leather and it needs a lot of resources. So 4 points is as much as I could give, giving us a final score of 51. We get into our first of the Lantern Armor variants. This is the Refined Lantern Armor Soldier. This is a armor set that comes in the Lantern Ire White box set. It's not a cheap box set, but it is one that I highly recommend because this armor set improves just about every single campaign, apart from maybe People of the Sun where it's hard to use Lantern Armor, but everything, because it improves the generic gear, the baseline gear. It's really good. And there's more. I've written a review about Lantern Armor Ire, and despite my misgivings about the model and the fact that it's expensive because there's a painter's model in the box, I think it's really, really good. I really hope it comes to the simulator, which it should do, and I would recommend you pick it up on the simulator as soon as it arrives, because this is just a nice improvement. As long as you have some other patterns, but you know, patterns is a different thing we'll talk about somewhere else. The main changes between this and original Lantern Armor is new set bonus, more armor points, less movement reduction, less slots, and it can upgrade itself. So to read the extra abilities, we have the matter, we have -1 movement on the Curious, add 4 armor to all hit locations wearing metal armor, and then we have this affinity ability, not puzzle, but just affinity ability. During the aftermath, if you have no armor points remaining in your body, you get the Veteran Lantern Curious pattern, which gives you an upgrade to this, which is what the second little blue box on the armor set is about. This continues to be a club armor set, because all clubs in Gear Grid game sharp, and we have +2 accuracy with club weapons. So, but all of that, but it's more offensively orientated, and additionally, we could put any hat we like on this. We don't have to, it's optional, but we could put a Rawhide headband here if we wanted to. Getting onto the scoring, this is a tank off tank set primarily, that's just how clubs tend to roll. Protection, I've given it an 8. I think it's got really good protections, and you know, it's wonderful to have this, such a great loading platform for a Rawhide headband. Layout, 10. There's almost nothing essential about this layout. You do want to have the pattern bonus, but you don't need to do it, and you don't have to have this in the cross layout if you don't want to, because the armor set doesn't need puzzle affinities beyond the Lantern Greaves. It's happy with those affinities being anywhere in the gear grid, so you can jig stuff around as much as you like. It's a really good layout, 4 slot armor sets with a good number of affinities that don't have essential puzzle abilities. Amazing. And 4 movement is fine for a survivor. 4 movement is absolutely fine. 3 is terrible. 4 is fine, so I'm not that worried about not having the Lantern Greaves. Giving it 5 on the affinities. It's not providing anything itself, but it's most of the way towards Monster Grease. It's a little better at doing Monster Grease than the normal Lantern Armor. Survival 0. It's lost that survival on arrival. Arrival survival is really good. So unfortunately this gets a 0 here. 7 for the abilities. I really like the extra armor points. The unlock is, I'm scoring it for the unlock, it's worth something. And then just the fact that it's a 4 slot kind of thing, that is relevant as well. Synergies, 8. Not only now does it synergize with clubs, it also synergizes with whatever kind of hat you want to put on there. That's amazing. Lifespan of 9, expected. This kind of armor sets should be lasting for most of the rest of the campaign. And cost is a 6. It's a bit cheaper to craft because it requires 1 less gear card, but you have more hoops to jump through in regards to getting the pattern, unlocking the pattern to be able to craft it all, etc, etc. So there's an issue, and of course as well, because of how patterns work, you can't have like loads of these. You're limited to the number that you can have. Final score 53, respectably a little bit better than Lantern Armor, but not overly so. That's actually what I'd want. I don't want this to be just automatically better than Lantern Armor. That makes it a non-decision as to whether you make Lantern Armor or you make Refined Lantern Armor. What like here is, we do have a decision, we do have to think about it. It's an improvement, how much of one? The answer though is quite a bit of one, because we have then the second version we craft. This is the Refined Lantern Armor, this is the Veteran version. So the changes now are it gets 5 armor points to all hit locations wearing metal armor, and its affinity ability on the body piece is increase the range of your perfect hits with club weapons by 1. Clubs like perfect hits. Club mastery and proficiency all rotates around that, so that's really good. We do want to have that active, but again, we're not puzzle locked into getting it active, which is nice. We got some flexibility. And we also have our extra set bonus. If you're wearing the Veteran Lantern Cuirass, you cannot be knocked down while you're attacking, and all your clubs in the year grid gain Sharp and Persistence 1. Persistence is a really great little ability. It's not explained here, so I'm going to read it off the glossary. So Persistence's first appearance is on Bone Daggers, if I remember correctly, and it is on a perfect hit you gain X survival, where X is the number. So this provides you with some forms of survival, and that means that this does actually have a survival rating unlike its predecessor. Okay, so let's get on to the score, shall we? And this one, the score jumps up quite a bit. So again, it's still a tank or off tank. I'm giving it a 9 for protection. I think there's very few armor sets that are better than this when it comes to protection. Layout a 10, it's really flexible in how you want to use it. If you look at it now, the Cuirass isn't dropping our movement tool, so we don't need to activate the Greaves, but we can do if we want that extra movement. And 7 movement's a good number, really good number. Affinities stays the same at a 5, solid, great affinities, but not like 100% immediately giving us anything beyond the lucky charm. Survival, we got a 9. I really rate gaining survival in a consistent or semi-consistent fashion throughout the showdown. And this Persistence 1 with the extra perfect hit range that we are getting is very, very good. Very good. So I can't rate it like much lower. Even though it's not a lot of survival, it is there, and it does matter, and it does add up, and it's rare that you have survivors who continuously regenerate survival through the showdown. Abilities, 9. I think all of these abilities are amazingly good. Not best in class, but very, very, very good, and definitely the best stuff really you can look for when it comes to clubs. Synergies, an 8. All these club synergies, just absolutely fantastic. Lifespan, again, a 9. I could on some days give it a 10, but I'm already scoring this thing so highly that I edged it down onto a 9. And the cost is a 6. It's not much more expensive to craft this once you've unlocked the pattern. It does cost a little bit more. So yeah, I can't give it like really high marks for cost, but it's solid. It's a reasonable cost. Final score is 65. Really good. I love this armor set. I think it's very, very, very strong. So we have one more armor set to look at for lantern variants. This is the Sunlantern Armor. This is with the Sunlantern Armor white box. It is a ranged orientated armor set. So first of all, normally you can't wear lantern armor in People of the Sun unless you have the Hellfire Secret Fighting Art, and lantern armor doesn't work very well with the Hellfire Secret Fighting Art because you need lots of red affinities, so it becomes awkward to try and use lantern armor. But this is a set that can use lantern armor, and it really doesn't mind at all. It's got less armor points. We are down a bit on our armor points, but not by a huge amount. It's just a loss of 5 armor points across the board. And what we get in exchange is this better helmet. This is better than the normal helmet. The Sunlantern mask gives us +2 movement, and again, we could actually get the Lantern Greaves active to have 7 movement, so that's an option. And if the gear points to a weapon with 4 or less strength, so that's the little arrow pointing to the left, That weapon gains range 4 and the thrown keyword. Pictured here is the dagger, the Horokubaya dagger. I apologise to anyone who actually speaks Japanese. Sorry, I don't have room to learn Japanese on top of English, Welsh and Swedish and bits of German and French that still rack around in my head. So, my bad. Anyway, so that's just there for referencing what is actually in this set. You can have any weapon there that has 4 or less strength, and the set bonus allows you to ignore extreme heat as mentioned, but also thrown weapons in your gear grid gain sharp. Amazing. Alright, nice. After attacking with a thrown weapon, if standing, you may move it to 2 spaces. Ooh, we got kiting. We can actually use this in People of the Sun to dash cancel monster attacks. So this is an incredibly good dashing, tanking set. As a consequence here, roll tank, off tank or damage, protection, an 8. Very good. Layout a 2. It's incredibly forced, the layout. You have just no choice. Affinities 6. I like the affinities on this, but again, not amazing. All the same issues previously. Survival, as mentioned, you get 0 now. Not only does it not get that survival, it has higher survival demands if you're looking to play this as a dash cancelling tank. Abilities though, love them. Love these abilities. 8 out of 10. Really, really like them. Synergies, again, these thrown synergies, these lower strength synergies, and just also club synergies. We can use some clubs here. Really enjoyable. I cannot understate how much I love this armor set, and if we get a thrown mastery that supports thrown, maybe hopefully using the disarm mechanic from the gambler's chest, so you throw something and then you're disarmed until you pick it up again, that would be really sweet. Hopefully this armor set is just going to get better with time. Lifespan 10. Once you've crafted it should last for the remainder of the campaign. Cost of a 6, as mentioned before, it's expensive. It's almost more expensive in many ways, because you unlocking the blacksmith isn't as enticing in People of the Sun, but you still do want to do it most of the time. So final score of 48. It's dropped off some points, mostly because of the lack of survival gains and the sort of lower-ish protection. So that covers our generics and their variants, and that gives us our benchmark. Given we had like 50-ish, 54, 51, I'm of the opinion if an armor set is scoring around 50 points or higher, amazing, it's doing its job. If it's scoring below that, not too bad. If like the Sunlantern Armor here, it's a couple of points down, that's okay. You know, you expect some variance, and some of this is just vibes based, and the numbers could change on a different day. In fact, I've amended the numbers a number of times while going through this, when I felt I've scored too much or too little for things, and even now as I'm looking at them, I don't always agree with myself fully, but we've got to pick some numbers, so here they are. So anyway, I'm going to be like, if something is end game, I expect it to score past 50 to, I want to see it scoring around 60 or higher, because they're meant to really, really last. And if something is scoring 60 or higher and it's not end game, I'm going to be concerned. If it's scoring under 40, I'm also concerned, and the armor set needs some addressing. So I'm going to pause for a moment to take a drink, and when we come back we're going to start going through our Node 1 armor sets. Alright, here we go. White Lion Armor. White Lion Armor is the first monster armor set you have available to make, and it is a classic new player trap. And I hate saying that, because I love the aesthetic of the White Lion Armor and I dig what it's trying to do. It just falls on its face while trying to do it. So this armor set is focused around daggers and katars and pouncing about the place like a little kitty. It is a red affinity orientated armor set, but also inexplicably wants a blue affinity and can't really supply that blue affinity by itself. On top of that, as you can see from the image here, the layout is super awkward. This is not good. I'm not happy with this layout at all. We want to connect here, we want to connect here. We can put a bone dagger into one of these slots, we can put a counterweighted axe into one of these slots, but it always ends up being very awkward. So that, on top of only having 15 armor points, means we're going to be in for a rough time with the White Lion armor set. I've done my best over the years to use it as best as I can, and it's frustrating because outside of the indomitable resource weapon with Lenore, this armor set is at odds with what daggers and katars are trying to do. So it's kind of never really manages to succeed. It's also at that odds with what it's trying to do as a whole thing. So let's just get to the scores and look at that terrible final score number and then explain why I'm there. So its only role is damage. And as a damage dealer, it wants to have good armor points because a lot of the time monsters shred your protections with reactions. They punish you for hitting them, so you want to have good soak to let you keep doing that. And also, if you're close to a monster like this armor set wants to be, you're more likely to get hit as well. Now, we do technically have a way of replenishing insanity via the White Lion helm, but it's super hard to get that helm active, and on top of that, you have to spend survival and an activation to use it. It's a terrible ability. So all I can give it for protection is a 4, and that's essentially me like, okay, well, it's got 15 armor points, and sometimes you have the boots active, and extra movement's really good. So 4 points is as much as I can give it, really. Layout a 3. I think this layout is terrible. It's asking for so many extra pieces of gear to get it active. It just has kind of just terrible. Just a terrible layout. And that White Lion Gauntlet in particular, not having any affinities, is a massive part of the problems with this. You know, if the Gauntlet had the affinities to put it in this spot here, spot 6, or just to put it here, we would be in an entirely different world when it comes to rating this armor set. It is frustrating how much the gauntlets hold back the rest of this armor set. Also, it's got the heavy keyword on most of its pieces as well, which I don't know why it has that, but c'est la vie. Anyway, so affinities, it's got a 4. It does do the Monster Tooth necklace immediately. That is worth something. Sorry, almost does the Monster Tooth necklace immediately. You just need a bone dagger or something to get it done. Most weapons cover this left facing red that you need. That's why it's pretty much good to go. But otherwise it's not really doing much. And the very frustrating part is it doesn't have a blue affinity in its layout, so we can never take advantage of its synergies with the Lion Beast Katar because it doesn't help the Lion Beast Katar's deadly. If we had, I don't know, if this was a red up and this was a blue down, so we could go boots, gauntlet, coat, again, we might be in a different place. There's so many little tweaks you can do to White Lion Armor to just help it get to be not what it is here. Survival, 0. Not only does it not generate survival when departing, and it's an early game armor set, so we really want it to do that, it has an ability that costs you your activation and drains survival to use it. So I cannot give it any score for survival. Abilities, on the other hand, there's some good abilities on this armor set. I've never had a complaint about the abilities. Extra accuracy for pouncing, sure. Pounce, yeah, great. Extra movement, really good. Extra speed and strength when attacking with daggers or guitars, great. You know, I think the abilities are exactly where they need to be, which is why we have a score of 5. And with a with a few tweaks, I'd be scoring this higher as well. Synergies, it's got great dagger synergies, it's got great Qatar synergies, it's got great reach weapon synergies. I think it has a lot of really good synergies, so 7. Lifespan, on the other hand, 15 armor points for the number of resources you spend on this. By the time you've crafted White Lion Armor, it is time to stop using White Lion Armor. So its lifespan is 2. Like I struggle to make this last any length of time unless I'm memeing with a red charm build and just trying to run it in situations where I should be using something else. Cost, compared to leather, compared to rawhide, this is incredibly overpriced. So I'm only giving it a 3. That's a final score of 28. I could see this scraping to 30, maybe 33 on a different day. I'm being extra harsh to White Lion Armor today, but it is the worst armor set in the game. So no matter what score I give it, it's never going to score higher than anything else. We have a variant though in People of the Sun. This is White Sunlion Armor. The changes are it has 10 armor points across the board, but it gives you +1 evasion and +1 speed. You get to ignore extreme heat, which allows you to use it, and when you pounce you get to move 4 spaces instead of 3, and hugely, you ignore models and terrain because you jump over them. Like, pounce is actually doing a pounce. We can also see the new piece of gear, the White Sunlion Mask, gives us when you pounce and attack from the blind spot, you get +4 strength for the attack, but we do have to get some puzzle affinities connected again. Despite that, already you can see the affinity layout and the affinities, and the layout in general is just better. It's already doing a lot better. So the roll again is pure damage. The protection on this armor set I think is a little, like, it's actually a smidge better because of that longer pounce and that extra evasion, although the evasion's not a huge thing, but it does mean you can finally put monster grease on this armor set and be happy with it. Affinities are 4, I think they're solid. Survival, it's still not doing the survival thing. Abilities though, and synergies, I'm very happy with those. I think they're great, so 7s each, and the lifespan are 5. This armor set actually lasts a lot longer. It turns out, even though it has less armor points, it is achieving more of what you want this armor set to be doing, and I really like that. I really like that. And also, suddenly, we don't have to use specific things for pouncing. We can choose whatever weapon we like, which means we're not tied down as much. Cost, it's still expensive. You've got to get the pattern for the helm and craft it and everything, so that's not ideal, and it's still an expensive set for what you get out at the other end. But all that does mean the final score 34, which, as I said, I think that's more within the acceptable range. And again, if I was on a different day, I could score this higher, who knows. But ultimately, yeah, it's the baseline of White Lion Armor that is holding the Sunlion Armor back, and I don't think we're ever going to see a proper addressing of White Lion Armor. I think we're just going to see more patterns being jammed into it and alternative like pieces for hybrid armor sets. We're never going to have the base problems resolved, I don't think. So generally, if you like to meme, get yourself some White Lion Armor. That's fine, but it's never going to be the correct choice from a purely power and success related orientation. Skillful players can and will generate value from their White Lion armor sets, but they're doing it in spite of the armor set. They're doing it because they're good at the game. Our next No 1 armor set is from the Gorm. It is Gorment Armor. I've chosen one layout here. This actually has 2 configurations. The first configuration is the boots, sleeves, suit and mask. The second configuration includes the regeneration suit, and this is similar to how the refined Lantern Armor set works. You've got 2 armor bonuses, set bonuses. The second one occurs when you have the full set plus the regeneration suit, and the first one otherwise. So we're going to look at the 4-slot set first. That has 1 armor point to all hit locations, and when you suffer more than 1 severe injury from attack, you ignore the 2nd severe injury, but you still suffer the 3rd and 4th and 5th, etc. And you have 15 armor points total. That's 3 on each of your locations. This is really good, by the way. The Gorment suit here, this slot compression, I love. I really think that's great. On specific individual abilities, Gorment boots mean other survivors can move through you, but they can't end space. That's strong. And the only bad thing about Gorment boots is the lack of affinities. Gorment sleeves gives you guard without spending survival if you have 2 greens. Gorment suit provides us with the guard. We need a blue, a puzzle green connected, nice and easy to do, and a red, nightmare. The red's a nightmare. It's such a nightmare to get. Why don't the boots have a red affinity, please? Anyway, guard. At the end of your attack, if you're standing and have a shield in your gear grid, you can spend 1 survival and move 3 spaces directly away from the monster and block 1 for free. And that doesn't cost any survival once you have the sleeves and active as well, so not too hard to do. You can have a leather shield in this slot very easily to get the 2 greens sorted. And also, it's worth noting, that move backwards 3, I don't like it. It's not good for the job you're trying to do, but if you're looking to dash cancel the monster, then it is good. Or if you put a survivor behind your Gorment Armor survivor, they can't move backwards. They don't collide because they're not being knocked back, so they just go, oh, I can't move, and they just stop. So there's ways of getting around that. Gorment Mask has one of the best hat abilities in the game. If you have it active, it needs a blue puzzle and a green puzzle. Then if your courage is higher than the monster level, you ignore intimidate actions. Really good. Really good. This is one of those pieces that I will peel off and put into mixed sets. It is one of the best hat abilities out there. I greatly rate the Gorment Mask. We'll come back to the regeneration suit when we look at the 6th slot, but for now let's get to our scoring. Okay, we can use this as an off-tank, we can use this as a tank, or we can take advantage of the fact that it only has 4 slots and use it as an archer set. Protection a 6, the armor point's a bit rough, but we have that amazing mask ability and that kiting retreating ability. Layout, I've given it a 6. It's not ideal, but you do have flexibility with regards to the boots and the 2 block, the bar that is the sleeves and the suit. The Gorment suit, not the regeneration suit. So it's not terrible, but you are kind of very locked in if you want to have the best ability on the set active, and that is the Gorment Mask, and there's not a lot of choices for your down-facing blue. It can be awkward to find. Survival, I've given it 1 point because technically it is giving you pseudo surge with its guard ability, but it isn't generating any survival by itself. Its abilities, 7. Love it. There's just some great abilities on this. Synergies, it's got synergies with bows due to its reduced gear grid and its kiting. It's got synergies with shields. It is just a very solid set when it comes to all of that. And its lifespan, because it can be upgraded to the 5-slot armor set, it has a solid lifespan. Cost, little expensive, again suffering the same problem that most Node 1 armor sets do, which is that it compares badly to rawhide and leather. So that's one of the big things that's holding it back, along with the affinities. Ultimately, final score of 41. More armor points and we would be absolutely where we need to be. Extra affinities would be good as well. But ultimately, it's not terrible. It's just awkward and hard to use in any reasonable fashion. Okay, so for the 5-slot armor set, we have to kill a level 3 Gorm, an ancient Gorm, and we get the regeneration suit, which is an accessory. So you can put this on any armor set. It provides 2 extra armor points to the body, which, as we talked about back in the hit location preamble, is really good. Additionally, it has a affinity ability with 1 green puzzle and then 2 more green, and it gives tons of green affinities all by itself, up, left and down. At the end of the showdown, you remove any permanent injuries you suffered this showdown. On top of that, the upgraded set bonus is now 2 armor to all hit locations, so we've got 4 in every location and 6 in the body. When you suffer more than 1 severe injury from an attack, you ignore all severe injuries after the first one. This gives us the one build where I like using the green charm. We call it the Wolverine build, and essentially you use a combination of Gorment plus a regeneration suit plus enough affinities to get you to 4 and the green charm and a life potion. Life potion prevents you from dying the first time that you might die in showdown, and then you've got the green charm to try and like reduce that chance even further. You basically play a survivor who gets horribly mangled and torn to pieces every showdown, and they use the regeneration and the damage cap, the severe injury cap I should say, to soak up the damage instead. It is a fun and unique way of playing. It is terrifying, and you absolutely want to have support from either Tough, the fighting art, or Stoneheart, which is the faceism philosophy. It's in the faceism philosophy for Ark survivors. I have played Stoneheart, Green Charm, and Life Potion, Gorment, Regeneration Suit build. And I've actually just played with the Regeneration Suit and some different gear instead. And it is a lot of fun. A lot of fun, especially with Stoneheart, which gives you +2 when it's max leveled, and that really matters. That halves the chances of dying for most of the options, apart from legs, which is capped at 1 anyway. So that brings us here for our Gorment Armor with the 5 slot. The role, I prefer to use it in his off tank, but you can do just a damage dealer that, Wolverine. Protection and 8. The regeneration on this stuff is really good, and I like the extra armor points on the body. That's something I'm always looking for. It's nice to have it here. Layout, a 7. It's better. The regeneration suit is covering 1 slot that we wanted for the helm, for the mask, but it's not ideal. Affinities are 5. There's definite improvement on affinities, but we're still missing that red affinity and that down blue. Survival a 2. When you don't care about getting injured, you don't care about dodging, so you don't need to spend as much survival on it, so that's why it's gone up in survival despite not gaining any survival on the armor set. Abilities an 8. These are unique abilities. I would be giving them a 10 if it wasn't the fact that you do kind of have to put extra protections in to avoid dying, but they're really fun, strong abilities. Synergies a 7. Plenty of different synergies and monster grease, and the green charm, boom boom boom. Lifespan a 7. This does fall off, but you can run it through the mid game, and it's nice that you can craft this early and use it for a fairly long time. Technically, as I said, if you are going full Wolverine, you could just run this for the rest of the campaign, which is impressive, but that's not completely normal. Cost, it's cheap. It's a cheap upgrade, so giving it 6. And final score is a 50. This could go up further. Mostly it is the affinities that is holding this set back. Okay, and next up we've got Crimson Armor, which, before I even get into breaking this down, I'm just going to say outright, I think this is the best Node 1 designed armor set that we've ever had. I think it's currently my front runner for being the best designed armor set the game has ever had, ever. And I'm going to break it down to explain why I think that. Before we do, let's just walk through the abilities. I'm going to give this one a little bit more attention because I've put such a big statement at the beginning of it, but let's go. So first of all, we have the Crimson Helm. Okay, this has Mind Lock, which you can spend an activation and you gain a Mind Lock token. Exactly 1. You can't stack them, you just get 1. You put like a generic token. I usually put it on the helm to indicate that. Maybe we'll get some custom mindlock tokens in the future, a little brain with a padlock on it. Who knows? Whenever you suffer brain damage, you ignore that and instead you lose one mindlock token. So as long as you're willing to keep reapplying this, you're immune to brain damage. This means anything that needs you to have insanity, for example, being insane, which requires 3 insanity, is something you can maintain under Crimson Armor. And this is similar to the Gorment Mask, but it's not as powerful. The key difference here is you've got to maintain it, so you have to keep reapplying it, unlike the Gorment Mask being passive, and it's just there. It's active right from the start. As soon as you have this on your gear grid, it's good to go. It doesn't need 2 other gear cards supporting it the way that the Gorment Mask does. So more intensive, less powerful, but easier to get active. So I think that's really interesting. We've got these 2 things doing similar stuff, but not identical. They're not getting in each other's way, and there is definitely a trade-off between which one you get. One being more action intensive and the other being more slot intensive. And then Crimson, this Mindlock, also not protecting against the other effects of an Intimidate, just the brain damage, but it also works against brain damage you might suffer from non-intimidates, like maybe during reactions. Then we have the Crimson Guard. This is when you depart, a pale scab hardens on your forearm, you gain a bleeding token, and you add 1 armor to the arm's hit location. So when I go through the armor, we've got an extra point on top of the 10 we already have. Then we've got the Crimson Folds. When you depart, you gain a bleeding token, and it takes 1 more bleeding token to kill you. So you'll be departing with 2 bleed, but you need 6 bleed base to die, and you can actually have other things on top of that, like Unconscious Fighter, which could extend the amount of bleeding you can take even further. Finally, we've got the Crimson Dress. This is another one of the monster movement abilities. Night and activation. You move forward 3 spaces. If you've moved 3 spaces, it doesn't say exactly 3 spaces, it doesn't say at least 3 spaces, so I'm not sure if somehow you go further what that does, but anyway, if you've moved 3 spaces, you get to activate your melee weapon, and you get +1 strength for each bleeding token you have. That means baseline, without any other bleed, as it lands, when we get into the showdown, we can Crimson Dress, we can Immortal Spin from off our Crimson Dress, and we get +2 strength. So that's a Monster Tooth Necklace. That's a little bit situational to activate. These monster movement abilities, they vary, but the key thing is they're all better when used with reach weapons, as I've talked about in the past, and I'll talk about more in the future, definitely in this video. So we have another synergy here, reach weapons. This is a common synergy though, but it is worth noting this one's a bit more generic, and the way you can scale further, and the way you scale it is by getting more bleeding. Then we have our set bonus. When you depart, you gain monster level insanity, and once per showdown you can spend your activation to gain armor points to all locations, all hit locations equal to the number of bleeding tokens you have. So when we arrive at the showdown, we have 10 armor points, +1 for the Crimson Guard. We can immediately activate, we have 2 bleed tokens on us, minimum, and we get another 10 armor points. So this is a 21 armor point set, a little bit of work to get it there, but that's the floor. That is as bad as this armor set gets in regards to protection, and as I've talked about, this kind of armor points, this is what I expect from the price you pay from to craft a Node 1 armor set. 20 armor points, that's what I expect to get. And I don't mind there's a little bit of extra work here, it's okay. Before we go on to the full breakdown, just going to quickly note the layout and affinities. So as you can see here, I've just put them in the top. We've got a 2-bar, horizontal 2-bar with a helm and slippers. And then we've got a left-facing L with the folds, guard and dress. That gives us 2 red, 1 green and a half blue that is horizontal, it's facing left so it can connect to the monsters, to Lucky Charm. This armor set has already Monster Tooth online. It is able to do Lucky Charm with a Lucky Charm +1 right-facing blue. That's very easy to get. It's a bit far away from an active Monster Grease, but it is worth noting if you get an up-down green item, like say the Sunspot Lantern from the Sunstalker, you've suddenly got 2 green affinities there, plus the half from Monster Grease itself. That means you just need a right facing green to get all active. So it is possible, it takes extra work. That's really good. But the other massive thing is this armor set doesn't have any affinity abilities. It doesn't have any puzzle affinity abilities. It is completely layout agnostic. This layout I have here with the affinities connected, this is just to demonstrate what affinities we can get close to for our breakpoints. You don't need any of these active. You don't have to connect a single one of them if you don't want to, if you don't need them. This is the best kind of layout you can possibly ask for. You're getting affinities, but you don't need to do anything with them at all. So that is really strong, and it is something where this is going to score full marks because it's a really good thing. So finally, before we get onto there, I just want to talk on the flavour. This is where you bleed yourself to gain power, and you have this like spin, and you have the ability to like lock yourself away mentally and not suffer like concerns or worry. This is so thematically how the Crimson Crocodile plays that's the reason why I said this is the best designed armor set. The Crimson Crocodile bleeds itself and gets stronger when it's bleeding. It like manages to giggle away and just not be affected by the fight that's going on. It doesn't ever feel like it's super desperate. It either feels like it's having a fun time or it's very angry. And you know, it also does these kind of rolls while fighting it to the left and right, which the Infernal Spin mimics on a different axis. So not only is it just perfectly designed mechanically, it is thematically perfect as well. So that brings us to our scoring. You can use this as a tank, you can use this as an off tank, you can use this as damage dealing. It's got the whole package. It just doesn't do support particularly well. You could run it on support if you didn't have anything better, because it does provide a lot of armor points, but about the only thing it's giving to a support survivor is that mind lock, so it's not a full flex. Protection, I've given it a 9. I've talked about why. 21 armor points base, but if we have 5 bleed when we arrive, that is 25 extra armor points there. And that's without even considering further on if we manage to get any other higher bleed synergies. Obviously, you're always going to want to have bandages somewhere, and going without bandages is just asking to die. But it's phenomenal that you can have this big pile of bleed, gain the armor points, and then you can scrub the bleed off, bandage it up, and you still keep the armor points. So 9 out of 10 for protection. This armor set goes the distance. It's just great. Layout 10, I explained why. Just exactly what I want for a layout. Agnostic to where its pieces go, offers additional things. Affinities, a 7. I explained why. Monster Tooth, done. Monster Grease, needs work. Lucky Charm, needs 2 supports. It can do all of those. It doesn't really get to any of the actual charms at all, so that's why it doesn't get like super high marks. But 7 out of 10, I really rate the affinities on this. I think it's well done. Survival, 1 point. That is simply because of the way that Mind Lock can sometimes reduce the need for people to encourage you under certain circumstances. Like there are things that if you take brain damage, you then get knocked down or suffer other things. So it doesn't give any survival itself, but there's kind of some situations where it reduces the survival demands on the rest of the group. It's a really corner situations, but I was like, I can't give it 0 because it does actually help with reducing survival needs. Abilities, a 6. I've been umming and ahhing back and forth on this. Some days I'll give it a 7, some days I'll give it an 8. I've gone for a 6 here, but as I say, with all of these final scores are kind of, if you asked me a week from now, I might put out different numbers. So in the moment I gave it a 6, and now I'm reading it, I'm like, I could give it an 8, but we're not changing it. Synergies, another 6. Its primary synergies are melee reach weapons, which that's very generic. Most monster movement sets have that synergy anyway, but it does have synergies with items and weapons that want you to be insane. That has become more common with the release of the Frogdog, and I really do rate playing Crimson Crocodile and Frogdog together in the same campaign. They play well in a lot of interesting ways. There's a bunch of things you can discover, and the Crimson Armor elevates some of the items and weapons the Frogdog Armor has a lot. So it's nice to have that. It's rare that we get two complementary expansions. The previous one was Sunstalker and Dragon King, which they complement each other. Crimson Armor, Frogdog, they complete each other. I think it's fantastic. So 6 on synergies, mostly for the insane stuff and the reach. Lifespan, 10. Yeah, like the number of arm points you can get on this without even having additional bleed threshold is enough for me to give it a 10. I have run this armor set for a very long time and been incredibly happy with everything it's doing. Its Mindlock just scales upwards. As the monsters deal more brain damage, Mindlock is preventing more of that, which is great. Final score, 56. As I said, I could see this going up to a 58, maybe even 59, maybe even a 60. Depends on the day. If I was rating aesthetics as well, I'd be giving this a 9 out of 10. Reducing 1 point off because the nipple discs on the female armor set are kind of like really just what's going on there. Like, it makes me laugh. You know, it's just a weird choice. If they're on the male ones as well, like, you know, the bat nipples for George Clooney, then fine. But they're just on the female, and it's like, I don't. Why? Commit to it fully, like the dragon armor, or don't. But don't go halfway on it. Anyhow, that's that. Let's get to our final Node 1 armor set. That's Frogdog Armor. This is the newest set. As I record this, I am writing about the Foxcrafter literally this week. This armor set isn't as focused or as powerful as Crimson Armor. To go through the abilities, we've got the mask is a green puzzle, so left and up. When you suffer the effects of gas, roll a dice on a 6+, you ignore it. Currently, the main source of gas is the Frogdog, so this is a silver bullet for fighting the Frogdog, but it is just gas. If we have other monsters or other events or things like that that have gas involved things, this synergy can just get stronger. But again, the flaw is it gives you a 50% dodge versus the Frogdog's faults. Fine. The vest has activate, inflate, add 1 armor point to a hit location that is wearing armor. So if any hit location runs out of armor points, you can put a bit of armor on top of it. Early game, this ability is really strong. Many Node 1 and Node 2 monsters only deal damage 1 point per hit. And if you don't have a shield, just being able to inflate and cancel out 1 hit can be very, very strong. There's also a whole thing about breakpoints. I've talked about those in videos about weapons and similar, and especially about monster damage. Breakpoints, it varies from monster to monster, but effectively, if you look at the average damage a monster is dealing, and then you divide the armor points in a location by that, you can work out the number of hits a monster will need on average to get to the severe injuries. Gaining just 1 armor point can change that. For example, very brief, if we got 3 armor points on the head and our monster deals 2 damage per hit, then currently its first hit puts us down to 1 armor point, its second hit puts us to 0 armor points and knocks us down, and then its third hit onwards will deal severe injuries. But if we inflate once, then we don't suffer the knockdown, and then if we inflate a second time, suddenly we're going to suffer the knockdown, but we are away from getting that severe injury, because now it has to go 2, 2, and then another 2. That is just a kind of like example of bad situation. If the monster's only dealing 1 hit point at a time, it's even better for you. So, you know, I've kind of talked about a flaw there where you're having to work quite hard, but 2 activations to cancel an entire hit if you don't have shields, that can mean something. Ultimately, I don't think this armor set should be used for tanking on the whole, but it can do an okay job as long as the monster damage doesn't climb up too much. Then we have got the suit. After resolving knockback, if you're knocked down, you may stand. Fantastic. Saves a little bit of survival because nobody has to encourage you. This is even better survival savings in the Crimson Armor. Finally, the boots. So, as you can see, the boots are sitting off by themselves. The armor set does not help activate them. They have a blue and red puzzle ability, and they do have the outfit keyword, just like the Frogdog mask. So, outside of armor sets, you can use these boots like potentially elsewhere because of outfit. But you know, outfit is always a fun one to have to consider. In fact, I'm going to read the rules for outfit here. Let's go back one. I need to do that. Give me 1 second. Okay, so here we go, just so we know where we are with that. Outfit. This completes an armor set. If you're wearing the rest of the set and it shares a material keyword with the missing armor gear. So the example here is if we get future armor sets with the membrane keyword, then we can run the Frogdog boots and the Frogdog mask instead, which is pretty cool. It's an interesting thing that actually when I wrote about this, I forgot to mention that outfit is on these two pieces. It's easy to overlook because it's not currently doing anything, but it's a future synergy and it's pretty good. Anyhow, let's get back to the boots because I just distracted myself. So this is the burst ability, and during a survival opportunity, so you know, for example, a monster reaction or being targeted by the monster, you may spend all leg armor points, a minimum of 1, to suffer knockback 5 in any direction. So other things to note, we'll lose all our armor points on the legs, but we can inflate to put a point back in, and we only need 1 point to use this. So we can maintain this ability by activating every turn or whenever we need to. So it's something we can use multiple times in the showdown. It's also, as I say, it's a kind of thing you could use during a reaction as long as you have a survival opportunity. Remember, attacking survivors don't, but other survivors do get survival opportunities during that. So if you happen to be getting hit, I don't know, like say the Crimson Crocodile's going to roll over you because of another survivor's attack, you can jet away and not get hit by it, which that's fantastic. The biggest thing these boots do though is you can dash cancel with them. So dash cancelling, in case you're not familiar with the term, is where the monster targets you and then you use a survival action or survival opportunity to move out of range of the monster. Now usually survivors can only dash 5 and monster movement climbs upwards, so it becomes harder and harder to dash cancel unless your survivor's movement goes upwards as well. As part of the reason movement's so strong is this ability to dash away and go, well, you ain't hitting me, tough luck. This gives us not only a way that works that doesn't need paint, it works in addition to. So you can, at the cost of all armor points on your legs and a survival action, when you're targeted, move 5 on the knockback and then move your normal movement, say for another 5. So you could be 10 spaces away from the monster after it's targeted you. Very few monsters have enough movement to do that. Sunstalker, Hand, they're kind of exceptions, but most monsters are they can't keep up with that at all. So what this actually does is, early on you can use this to cancel monsters' attacks and do a little bit of pseudo tanking, and we've got loads of green affinities here, which means that the armor set synergizes super well with monster grease, so it can tank in the early game. And also dash cancelling, that's really fantastic as well. Later on, if you're fighting at a distance, this armor set basically lets you get out of trouble. So as a consequence, the primary success I've had with this armor set is by running it as a archer set, because that makes the best use of this dash ability. It keeps you super safe. You can then be far away and have some off turns where you rebuild the armor point on your legs, etc, etc. It's similar to Gorment Armor in that it just has this unintended synergy. It also isn't bad with reach weapons either, not as effective, but also something to think about. It's common with just about all of these monster movement abilities. Reach weapons, good. This one's one of the few that works with ranged weapons though, instead of just melee. Super exciting. Scoring, you saw this briefly. So roll, damage dealer primarily, can be an off tank, can be an early game tank. Protection, I've given it a 7. Not great on the armor points front, but it is very capable of protecting itself by expending its armor points. Oh, sorry, I missed the set bonus. So 1 armor point to all hit locations, so it's got 15 armor points. A little bit more with respect to the vest inflate, so I think the protection on this is actually quite reasonable for a Node 1 set, even though it's lower than what I'd like. The ability is Propel. You spend your Night and Activation, and you spend all of your armor points at a hit location. You suffer knockback in any direction equal to the spent armor points, and then you activate a weapon to attack any weapon, again not necessarily melee, can be ranged, and your attack gains this amount of strength, increasing the chances of it wounding. So we could say expend all of the armor points on our sleeves, which baseline say that's 3, and we get +3 strength. So again, this has got a solid ability. It just kind of expends its armor points to deal damage, so it can get very glass cannon-y, which is why I recommend it with a bow over anything else, because bows are really safe. If we get thrown weapons going a bit more, and I hope we do. I'd like to see a throw mastery where you throw weapons at the monsters and then you are disarmed. Disarm's a new mechanic in the Gambler's Chest where you put a disarm token on the weapon, and then you put a token down that you have to go move on top of to recover your weapon. I think that would be super cool for the mastery, so you can throw anything and then recover it and throw it again. But anyway, so that would be the other thing. Anything with range, super good, super cool, very interesting. Technically you could run it a little bit as a support set, because you can be very safe, but I don't think that's taking advantage of what this set is doing in regards to all its abilities. So anyway, to go back to that, damage off tank, early tank, I explained why. Protection 7, because of those abilities that let you stay safe and self-inflate a bit. If you know your breakpoints, you can be very good at managing that. Survival, giving it a 1 because it's got a pseudo dash, but it's not really a dash. I can't give it more than that because you are still expending stuff and you have to re-inflate to get going again. Abilities are 7. I think most of these abilities are really good. The outfit isn't relevant to the armor set as a full itself, but possibly relevant to other future armor sets. The main things is, of course, I think that the boots ability is incredibly good, and the armor set ability is okay, and I do quite rate the not getting knocked down because that helps again with other survivors not having to encourage you to your feet. That's great. Synergies, giving it 6. These are very standard kind of synergies, except it's doing bow, that's nice. Talked about why. And the cost, a 6. I don't think it's as well costed. It's better than many of the Node 1 armor sets, but it is still just... I don't want its stats improved, I want its cost reduced. It's quite hide intensive, and that isn't good enough. Either the armor set has to be like Crimson Armor, really good for the price, or it just needs to be cheaper. Many Node 1 armor sets simply need to be cheaper. And that's the end of our Node 1s. We're on to Node 2. We've got Screaming Armor. Okay, another layout agnostic set. This is the primary layout you'll see. Let's go through the abilities. We've got Scream on the horns. Non-deaf insane survivors gain +1 movement and turn the ground. All other non-deaf survivors gain +1 insanity. Okay, so the way this works is if you're not insane, you get +1 insanity. So it'll give all of the survivors, including yourself, protection against brain damage. Obviously this falls off as monster intimidate damage climbs with their levels, but against level 1s, pretty solid. And if they are insane, they get +1 movement. That can be quite useful. Again, now we've got something we could synergize with the Crimson Armor here, because the Crimson Armor is very good at maintaining its insanity. So, solid. The Screaming Bracers have, when you archive terrain, you may activate terrain, you may add +2 to your roll result. This is really big. This is a really great support ability. It used to be even better because it used to spawn a Canthus. I really liked that system because suddenly you could play the Screaming Armor set as a medic. That was really fun to actually have a healer available. That's not here anymore, but the ability has been given to the Screaming Antelope knowledge if you're playing with Ark survivors, so I'm okay with it not being on the Screaming Bracers these days. The Screaming Skirt gives you +1 to all severe injury roll results on your waist, meaning Only a 1 is fatal on the waist, so that's a 1 fatal on the waist, a 1 fatal on the legs. That's really good for a change. The leg warmers is on arrival. Your feet hurt, you gain +3 insanity. The set bonus includes 1 armor to all hit locations, and then we've got this body and other half of the set location bonus, armor set bonus, sorry, which I've left so we can talk about them together. So Screaming Coat has slam. You spend your night and you move full move, so your entire movement in a straight line. If you move at least 4 spaces and you end up adjacent to the monster, because you'll stop when you get to the monster, you move it back 1 space, representing like you bumping it backwards. It gains -1 toughness until the end of round, so you're setting up other survivors to have an easier time to wound it. And then on the set bonus, after you slam, you can spend your activation, you move forward 1 step, and you activate a melee weapon with extra strength, +2 strength. It's a little small for me to read. That's just the nature of this PowerPoint presentation, I apologise. And if you wound with a spear, you apply that wound roll to the next selected hit location in this attack. So that means you get to have the same wound roll against the first 2 locations. Very useful, very strong. About the only thing that's unfortunate about Screaming Armor is the armor point situation. I would like to see an extra armor point on the horns. I'd like to see an extra 2 armor points on the coat. I'd like to see an extra armor point on the skirt. I think those 4 extra armor points would put Screaming Armor exactly at a power level I think that is correct for what it's doing. But as it stands, even without this armor set is pretty unique and interesting. So first of all, as mentioned, it's layout agnostic. It doesn't care about any of its affinities, but you can get some, and it has very good affinities. So we've got a whole 1 red if we want to do Monster Tooth Necklace, and we can easily move the Screaming Horns away in order to get the Monster Tooth Necklace in the top left corner and something else connected to it. So close to having that done, fantastic. It has 2 green already, so it's close to getting Monster Grease online if you wanted to use this for frontline tanking for whatever reason. Maybe it's all you've got. It's nearly there. It just needs a right facing green to cover itself on that front. It has it has the Lucky Charm active already, and my favourite thing about this is if you rejig the hit locations a bit, you can actually get this to have 4 blue affinities and put the blue charm on it, and you end up with a build that goes blue charm with Lucky Charm, and I'll explain why that's great in a moment, and then probably a shield to support yourself a bit more, and a good spear. And we've got some solid spears we can pick from. I especially recommend the Indomitable Survivor Zell, who has a Indomitable resource weapon, so when you kill the level 3 Screaming Antelope, you will get that. And it is very good spear that fits into everything this armor set's trying to do, which is great. So, to get back to the Lucky Charm, this set bonus with the spear, you actually want to roll critical wounds, which is unusual because spears don't usually leverage critical wounds. But because you get to apply the wound result to the second location, if you score a critical wound on your first attack, you then get a critical wound, on your first wounding roll, you get a critical wound on your second wounding roll as well, which is incredibly good, like really insanely good. And because you're also getting the blue charm, activated for that protection against the trap, you're in an even better spot. So as a consequence, my recommendations for the Screaming Armor in rolls is as a Lancer for damage dealing or support. Support, it'll use the horns to help everyone with insanity or movement, and it'll also be the one that does like the work of picking up stuff from all the pieces of terrain thanks to the braces. Protection, I'm giving it a 5. I think it's reasonable, but it doesn't have much going for its protection outside of insanity gains and natural armor points. Layout, 10. Again, it's agnostic. It doesn't care about its affinities. That is really great, and it brings some. Again, then affinities, I've given it an 8. I explained why. Survival, 1 point, again, because it can do some things that like help reduce survival costs, but it's not gaining any itself. Abilities, a 9. I think all of the abilities on this armor set are great. That is not where the issues are. Lifespan of 6, as I say, While I really like Lancers, this does fall off in being able to do the job. It might be something you use for a fair while, but you're often looking to have it carried by spears and then cost. It can be difficult to get this armor set constructed. It tends to get constructed faster, not because of the costs, but because the Screaming Antelope is a loot pinata. So I'm not taking that into account with the scoring here because it needs a bunch of like generic hide and things, and it's one of those armor sets, like many of them, where you need a specific resource drop to build one piece of the gear, so that can hold it back as well. But ultimately, final score of 51, and as I talked about earlier, I think that is around where it should be. So it's pretty close. As I say, I just want to get like 3-4 more armor points on the set. 1 on the head, 2 on the body is, the minimum I'd ask for. But I accept 1 on the head and 1 on the body. Regardless, I think Screaming Armor is super close. It's not as busted as it used to be, but it is still viable and enjoyable, and it's fairly decent. Right, next up we have got a variation on Screaming Armor. So this is the People of the Sun specific Screaming Armor. You will need to unlock the pattern in order to be able to make the Screaming Sun mask that will let you construct this armor. It's essentially the same. It does have a little bit of a more awkward layout because it has a puzzle affinity now on the mask here, this one. So this is like pretty forced and locked in. The ability now is Scold. Non-death knockdown survivors suffer monster level brain damage and stand, and our set bonus now is after you slam, spend an activation to move 1 space and attack with melee weapon. If you're attacking with a dagger, increase the range of your perfect hits by 2 for this attack. So instead of being a spear based armor set, it's now a dagger based armor set. I really like this armor set, but a big part of that is my personal love of daggers. Daggers are one of my favourite weapon types, so I really like that. But I do think it's interesting in that it's a little bit more difficult to craft, but it's doing something different, and even though it's not got more protections, it's still only got the same overall 15 armor points. It's pretty solid. Its main role is damage. It's got a minor supporting role. Protection, a little bit lower in my opinion, but not by a lot. Layout, I've had to reduce the score because it is genuinely a weaker layout because you now have a puzzle affinity in there, but it does activate it by itself. Affinities, still great. Survival, again, does a little bit to help with survival, mostly through terrain interactions. Abilities are 10. I love the abilities on this. I think they're great. The synergies, giving it an 8. It's lovely to see such a good dagger synergy. Daggers, perfect hits, boom, boom, boom. And it still is it still has a slam, and slam's just great by itself. Lifespan of 6. It lasts a bit longer in People of the Sun, you think. Cost, around the same. Bit harder to unlock, so I would have given it maybe half a point off, so 3.5, so I'm stuck at like 4. Final score of 51, which, if we just go back and compare, is the same as a Screaming Armor. I think these two are very comparable, and you sort of have your choices on which one you want to run. Next, we have the Smog Singer's Singing Armor. So, the helm on this is up green, down blue puzzle affinity, which it can activate itself. When you are attacked and suffer more than 1 hit, you get to ignore 1 hit. So you basically have a permanent better than deflect 1 sitting around there. There's no stopping this. Well, situationally better. Anyway, ignoring 1 hit is incredibly good. The gloves have you reduce the cost to perform your ballads by 1. Sometimes this is relevant, a lot of the time it isn't. We'll talk about that when I talk about ballads. The breastplate is hit song, so another monster movement ability. In this case, you spend your knight and bolt, you move forward and attack. If you move at least 4 spaces, the first time you wound during the attack, you encourage all survivors, which is nice. You've got an encourage tagged onto this. Finally, we have the singing boots. At the end of your act, you move up to 3 spaces away from the monster, so this allows you to push backwards ready for another hit song. It allows you to keep safe. It also allows you to perform dash cancels more easily, because if you're tanking, you're suddenly in front of everyone else. Set bonus gives us an extra armor point to all hit locations, putting us to 20 armor points. That's the number I've been talking about. So it passes the protection check, the armor point check. And the other ability is you may perform 2 ballads simultaneously. So ballads are a mechanic that are on instruments that come with the Smog Singers. Basically, after a certain number of wounds, you can archive those wounds and you get to have a ballad going, which is like a flat bonus, for everyone. Your singer is rocking out and encouraging everyone, like that dude in Mad Max on the guitar. Mad Max Fury Road, yeah. Anyway, and you can have 2 of them. It's actually not super easy to get 2 of them going. The monsters need to be quite durable, but there are some. It depends which ballads you pick. The biggest problem is that most instruments are noisy, and noisy is a no-no, because the harvester touchy, noisy survivors with the bad touch, and we don't like that. So we usually don't bring noisy out unless you have ways of ignoring it. There is a non-noisy instrument in the Gambler's Chest in the patterns, so we can get that ballad going, and technically we can have the Grim Muffler from Halloween Lucy to get another instrument going, which would probably also be a weapon. So it is an option. It's just not one I use very often, and I don't miss it. I don't miss this, but the reduction in cost and all that kind of things with the right gear available, I can occasionally make use of it. Affinities, we can see it's got a few demands. It wants an extra down-facing green. It provides an extra red. It has this extra green kicking around that's not super useful because of the way the singing cap works, and you want the singing cap active. It's the best ability, even if you're not tanking. This is such an amazing ability. Free dodge, however you want to think it. Just anytime a monster hits you 2 times or more, you get to just knock one of those numbers off. That's superb. Onto our scores. Roll. I consider this a tank or off-tank set. You're going to be front line. The set's trying to ask you to back up and running and do hit songs, which tanks can do via dashing. I don't think it's great for damage dealing though, this armor set, because its damage section is orientated around ballads. Ballads are linked to instruments. We've already talked about why that's not great, but it is worth noting you can use as many instruments as you like when fighting Nemesis monsters. Atlas is very very vulnerable to ballads. That is a deliberate design, which is nice. Protection 9. It's great. It's got dash cancel built in. It's got a self hit ignore. It's got really good armor points. It's great. I really like it. The layout, I've given it a 7. As I said, there's a couple of awkwardness. Mostly it's the fact that it doesn't activate all of its abilities itself, and it has a 3-slot vertical bar that you need to fit somewhere in that basically blanks one of its other affinities. Affinities themselves, though, are pretty good. If we just go back briefly, we're very close to Monster Grease. We have Lucky Charm. We will struggle a bit with Monster Tooth Necklace for sure. So, and on the whole, though, I think these are great affinities. So, reasonable score. Survival, just a 1 point. It's got a little bit it has this encourage built in on the hit song, which is nice, but encouraging, that's probably one of the least valuable survival actions, except when it's life-saving. Coup de grace. But on the whole, 1 point again. Abilities, I've given it a 6. Most of that is carried by the boots and hat. I don't value the ballad abilities too highly for the reasons I explained. Synergies, given it a 7. Has instrument synergies, but the real reason I've given it this is because it synergizes with shields, block and deflect really, really well. Because if you're ignoring one hit, then it's easier for you to then block or deflect the remaining hit. And then you could dodge another one. So technically, at the cost of 1 activation and 1 survival, you can ignore 3 hits. That's really good. Lifespan 8. I've run this for a fairly long time. I've run it against very powerful monsters. It has performed admirably. Of course, the longer I go in the campaign, the further away from being the front main tank it's going to do. Final score 52. I have no suggestions about how this would need to be improved. I don't think it needs to be improved. I think it is another really well done armor set. Its drawbacks, what's holding the score back, is a problem endemic to Kingdom Death as a whole, and we go over this every time we talk about instruments, so you know the drill by now. Okay, we have one final Node 2 armor set. This is from Spidiculous, and this is the Silk Armor. So, this has a lot of words involved, and it's actually quite a tough one to craft as well. We'll start with the Silk Turban. This needs a left blue and right green puzzle. You activate, turn the monster to face away from you, use only during the survivor's turn. So this is a unique ability, this is a unique form of monster control. This can give you immediate access to the blind spot whenever you want it. It can help you orientate the monster back towards your tank if required. It's a really strong, really unique and interesting ability. The Robes and Sash have the same ability. They both, when you depart, you gain 1 survival, so you'll get 2 survival total when departing. And then they have this puzzle ability. For the robes, you need red up, red down, left blue to activate it, and for the Silk Sash you need right green and up green to activate it. These are, you activate and you add 1 armor point to all hit locations once per showdown. Technically you can have both of them active, so Silk Armor has the potential to gain an extra 10 points on top of its normal points. In practicality that really doesn't work out because of how hard it is to lay out this armor set. Final ability is Silk Boots. This requires an up green, so a down green connector and a left green connector. So for 2 puzzle, it gives you +1 movement, really good. Once per round you may spend 1 survival to gain 2 insanity. Also really good if you've got consistent ways of gaining survival, which some survivors do have. So the set bonus is 1 armor point to all hit locations, and whenever you are attacked after hit locations are rolled, you may change 1 hit location dice to the result of your choice. Really powerful. This is one of those things that on paper it's like, oh okay, and then when you start playing with it, it's like, I've got no armor points left in my head. Ha, you've hit me in the body where I've got all my armor points instead. Or, oh dear, I'll just push it to the legs where I have the least chance of dying. It is very, 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 very powerful. And to be completely honest, the only issues that lie with Silk Armor are surround its layout, which as you can see you'll constantly have to compromise with. This is the best layout I usually use because I want the boots active, I want one of the sash or robes active, and I want the silk turban active. So this is what I normally go for. This is also, it gets monster grease in on this, so it does decent tanking. I don't mind the awkwardness here at all. It's the cost I have a problem with, and we'll talk about that during the point scoring section. In respect to the affinities, as you can see, it can kind of do whatever you want, apart from Lucky Charm, which is a bit of a struggle. However, it turns out to be less free than it looks, and most of the time it just gives you monster grease connections. And this massive amount of requirements for puzzle affinities does always make the armor set feel kind of bad. Actually, before we do, let's go back a second. So there's an alternative layout where if we put the silk robes here, we put the silk turban here, we can put the silk sash here and the boots here, we lose access to the boots. I'm going to say that getting the silk robes active in exchange for the silk boots is never worth it. So this is pretty much the only layout I end up using almost ever, which is why when we get to scoring we can see I've not scored high for layout. So rolls, tanking, it's very good at tanking. It has access to the silk bodysuit, which is a supporting item that gives you more damage mitigation, and part of its synergies is working with silk armor. It can also do support via the fact that it can generate, that it can manipulate the monster, and also, you know, that actual spending survival to gain insanity does a lot more than you'd think once you start going with it. So it's very solid, but primarily it's a frontline sort of tanking set. That's why it gets 8. It does a very good job of tanking. Layout a 3. I've talked about why. It's not like you're forced into doing anything, but you're constantly having to compromise, which sucks. Affinities are 4. Mostly I think it has monster grease affinity, which is fine. It's definitely what it's trying to do. But I don't think it has other affinity synergies particularly. That said, I'm now looking at this and going, well, I could probably score this maybe 2 points higher on the layout front, on the affinities front, sorry. Because if you're willing to compromise and sacrifice, you can get access to a reasonable amount of affinities. It's mostly the red ones that are hard to do. Survival, got a 7. It's got like really great on the survival front. You get 2 when departing, and the fact that you can redirect attacks hitting you means that you actually have to dodge less than you'd normally think. Abilities, a 10. I love all the abilities. They're really, really good. Synergies are 5. It's quite generic. It just has sort of the usual, like a little bit of backstab, a bit affinities, but synergies, but that's not working particularly well with what the rest of the armor set is trying to do, in that it's trying to take hits and generate value that way. Lifespan, though, this is the really sad thing. So lifespan and cost is where this armor set falls off. The problem is that this silk turban here, you have to get a strange resource by killing a level 3 Spediculus. This is the sticking point that's been discussed for a long time. The hope still remains that Campaigns of Death will fix that, because the trouble is, once you've defeated a level 3 Spediculus, Silk Armor is in its sunset period. It is stopping to be relevant. In fact, it's kind of not good enough against a level 3 Spediculus anyway, even if you have a full set. It's the silk bodysuit that does a lot of carrying there, and there's a bunch of other armor sets you can put the silk bodysuit on instead that just do a better job. So that is the big problem. It's terribly, terribly priced. That's why it gets a 1, the lowest score possible, and it gets a 3 on the lifespan, because as I said, by the time you've got it, some other set's looking to take over tanking, or has already taken over tanking, which is sad. It is a little better because now we have the Clothed and Satiated bonus. We can at least get a set bonus for Silk Armor, and we don't mind not having quite so much on the head, but that's not a strength of Silk Armor, that's a strength of Clothed and Satiated. Okay, that brings us to Phoenix Armor, our first of our Node 3 armor sets. Very much the sort of start of the mid-game. Now, Phoenix Armor is a set with great abilities held back by bad affinities. I do have a little note on that near the end in regards to how it gets its longevity improved with the Gambler's Chest, but that isn't on the simulator yet, so I've not been able to fully talk about it, and I didn't put a slide together here, so I'll just have a couple of notes on it. Just say, be aware that this armor set gets better if you have the Gambler's Chest, but only after you're killing level 3 Phoenixes. So, Phoenix Helm, puzzle blue, and a green and a red. If you are insane at the start of the showdown, you get +1 evasion token. Very simple, very straightforward. It's not as good as just getting +1 evasion when you depart, which is a shame, but an evasion token is generally better than just +1 evasion, because token synergies can and do matter. The Phoenix Placard has one of the best body piece abilities in the game. It requires a left green puzzle, an up blue puzzle, and a right red puzzle. And then if you are insane, so 3+ insanity, you ignore the first, hit each round, and suffer 1 brain damage instead. So obviously Smogslinger Armor is like almost better than this, except this will actually ignore the first hit if only 1 hit has occurred. So Smogslinger generically better, but Phoenix Placard has that higher ceiling of power in exchange for the cost. Because it's reducing and you're suffering that 1 point of brain damage at a time, you do need someone around to help with your insanity losses and just keep you topped up. The Greaves and the Phoenix Gauntlet are the same in that the Greaves and the Folds are the same in that when you depart you gain +1 insanity, so there's +2 insanity total. That's to try and help you be insane, because this armor set wants you to be insane all the time. And then the Phoenix Greaves have, if insane, gain +2 movement, very strong, and synergizes with the armor set bonus. So our set bonus is add 1 armor point to all hit locations, meaning that we have 5 on each location. That's a 25 armor point set. That's great. And then the ability is Charge, which is spend your Knight and Bolt, you full move in a straight line. At the end of the movement you activate a melee weapon and you add the number of spaces you move to your strength for this attack. So with the Phoenix Greaves, that means you can regularly, if you position well, have +7 strength to your attack. Very, very good. And even if you're not insane, you could get up to +5. But also, this isn't asking for a minimum movement. It's whatever movement you manage to get is going to provide a bonus. Now, you need to end up in range of the monster. So the best ones to have here are, again, reach weapons. You'll find this very commonly referred. So spears, axes, some whips, those kind of stuff. That's what you're looking to use with this. It makes it yet another armor set that is like that. On the affinity front, you can see it's providing a blue affinity and then a half green and 2 half reds. It is really unfortunate that the Phoenix Greaves doesn't have a left-facing red, because this armor set has a lot of problems. It's a rainbow armor set that doesn't manage to create a rainbow. The Phoenix is a rainbow monster. The whole design around it is having 1 of each affinity for the whole rainbow, and the armor set just doesn't support that. So roles, it can be your tank, it can be your off tank, or it can be your damage dealer, or it can flex around with any of those. Protection, very, very good. Very good protection. Phoenix Placard is amazing. Very good armor points. It's not heavy either, which is great. This is one of those armor sets that has a lot of protection without being heavy. Its layout is terrible though. We've just looked at why. It constantly needs assistance from other pieces of gear. I don't think that's really an acceptable place, but the decision to fix Phoenix Armor was made via the Indomitable resources rather than by fixing the problems with the armor set at its core. So for those of you out the Gambler's Chest, know it gets better, but you have to spend to get access to what does make it better. Affinities 3, terrible. Just terrible. I mean, about the only really exciting good thing it's doing is it provides a blue affinity, which isn't good enough. Survival, have given it a 2. It doesn't generate any survival itself, but you do have to dodge less when using this armor set, so that is very nice, and having that extra movement means there's less situations where you need to dash, so that all adds up. Abilities, a 9. I think every single one of its abilities is really good. It's just let down by affinities. Synergies, it's a very generic set beyond having the classic synergies with shields, in the same as Singer Armor, and also in the case of reach melee weapons. Hey Pamshire, which I'm sorry if I sound a little distracted. My dog is desperately trying to get something from me. She keeps on pawing at my hand. I'm going to have to pause after I finish this Phoenix Armor and look at that. Cost, this is a really expensive, lifespan first. Once you have this, it should last for the rest of the campaign, especially if you have access to the Indomitable resources. With the Indomitable resources, consider this to be a lifespan 10 armor set. It's very, very good once you have those. And then cost is a 2. It's incredibly expensive to put this together. You generally need to work in advance. It needs iron. That's expensive. It has a lot of hide requirements. It has a lot of resource in general. It's very expensive. Final score 41, but as I say, if you take into account the extra Indomitable resources, then I think this is scoring a 51. and that means with the Gambler's Chest, Phoenix Armor is kind of where it should be, but it's really been hard carried by external pieces of gear rather than something intrinsic to the set itself. Okay, I'll be back in a moment, which will be instantaneous for you. Let's find out what Pam wants. Our next set is Dragon Armor from the Dragon King expansion. So this is very much a parallel to Phoenix Armor, but it has some advantages. So to go through the abilities, the Dragon Skull Helm needs 2 of its 3 red affinities connected, and you get +1 to all severe head injury results, which, you know, that's significant. And you get to ignore the shattered jaw severe injury result. So if you have a shattered jaw, you get to pop this on, and the Dragon Armor will provide a replacement jaw for you, meaning you'll get access to those kind of things. Then we have the Dragon Mantle, which requires an up red, left green, down green, and right blue, which it cannot provide itself in the armor set, but it does the others. And at the start of the showdown, you beat your chest mightily and gain survival up to the survival limit. Only a couple of armor sets do this kind of survival gain. This is one of the best survival gains in the ability because it means you can spend survival willingly as much as possible during the hunt phase, knowing that you will get a full refund once you get to the showdown. The Dragon Belt has you are not knocked down from suffering a heavy injury. It's a nice ability. It's usually one you don't really get to activate because, as we can see, we don't have a left blue and an up blue affinity in the armor set, and that's actually a very hard to get combination. One of the few pieces of gear that covers it is the Talon Knife. That is a weapon with the Dragon King expansion in the Dragon Armory, and it's a rubbish weapon. It's terrible, so you only ever make it for the affinities. On the whole, I actually just put like something else in there. Most of the time I just connect the Dragon Mantle and don't worry about the belt, but if you can't get it active, it's okay. Finally, the Dragon Boots have +2 movement during your act, so not anywhere near as good as the Phoenix ability, but it's always available during your act. You don't have to be insane. It isn't available during the Monsters Act, so you can't dash cancel very easily. That does mean something. It matters. It absolutely matters. So solid, but not as powerful as some of the other movement abilities. Then our set bonus is +1 to all hit locations, so again we got that 25 armor points. Worth noting again, this armor set isn't heavy, which becomes less common when you get to higher armor point values. Most of them are heavy. This isn't. And its ability is leap. So this is a Final Fantasy reference, I believe. You spend a knight and a bolt, you leap into the air, place your survivor in an unoccupied space exactly 5 spaces away in a straight line, then you activate a melee weapon and attack with +2 accuracy and +5 strength. So very comparable to the Phoenix one. This is really, really good against monsters that have a large base size, a 4x4 base size, because you can jump from one side to the other over and over. And with reach weapons, even the 3x3 monsters are pretty easy to do this with. I have some demonstrations of that in the Dragon Armory video, Dragon Armory and You, I believe. So you can check that out if you want to see visually how it works out. The big key thing here is we don't get potential for masses and masses of bonus strength like Phoenix Armor can give us so much strength if we can increase our movement. It keeps scaling more and more. The +2 accuracy I think is really nice to have. Interestingly, you can be in front of the monster and you can jump to its back and land in the blind spot sometimes and get an extra accuracy that way. So that's really nice, and also you get to jump over terrain and things, so it's very solid. It is, as I've said with all the others, better with reach weapons. So there's a really good one you can get in the Nuclear Scythe. That's so baked in synergy there, but is a little more. Getting on to scoring, I think this is good for tanking, good for off tanking, and good for damage dealing. It'll depend on the rest of your armor sets which role it's going to take. 8 on the protection, it's solid, but it is not as good as the best stuff out there. Layout, I've given it a 6. It's got some awkwardness, but a lot of it I don't really mind about. You can put other things in the slots because really it's only the body, head and waist that care about positioning. Affinities, solid 7. If we just go back to take a look, it's got the Monster Tooth necklace already active. It's not too difficult to get a lucky charm active. It's not impossible to get a monster grease active, although a lot of the time you won't, because you have to actually put a piece of gear here and here to connect up, or have some kind of thing here. That's the main reason I haven't given it like super high. It's very close to getting the red charm active, but as I talked about at the beginning of this video, that's kind of a bit of a meme. Survival, this is kind of my favourite ability, so 10 out of 10. And abilities on the whole, an 8. I really rate Leap. I really like the head ability, that's fantastic. And you know, we already talked about the body ability and the movement, all great. Synergies, a 6. Again, it's just kind of a reach synergy armor set. It doesn't even have like synergies with shields and things because it doesn't have too much extra protection beyond its ability to position well and natural armor points, plus you know the head bit. Lifespan an 8. Once you've got this, it'll last for a fair amount of time, but it can't go the full distance without some additional upgrades. Cost, this is its worst point. It is very expensive, it is very awkward to make, and one key resource from the Dragon King is a single of in the deck, and I don't believe there's there's no like critical wound location that will automatically give you that piece of gear. I think I can't remember exactly right now. I'll double check that when doing the Dark Bestiary video on the Dragon King sometime probably next year given how long it takes to do the Dark Bestiary videos. Ultimately though, it's expensive. Final score 55. It just sits together better than Phoenix Armor. If you were going to ask me like which armor set I'd build out of Dragon and Phoenix, I have the choice of both. I build Dragon Armor most times. Although if you're asking me what mixed set I'd put together, then I would be looking at the Phoenix Placard as a part of a mixed set very often. Okay, our next one is really good. This is the Sunstalker's Cycloid Scale Armor. To walk through its abilities, first of all we have whenever you spend a movement, the scale's colour shift and you gain +1 evasion until your next act. That is every time, so if you manage to spend a movement activation multiple times during a turn, you'll get more and more evasion. We then have the Cycloid Scale Jacket, the body piece. When you spend a movement, you shadow walk and may move through spaces survivors occupy without causing a collision. So this is the inverse version of the Gorment boots. Then we have the sleeves. When you shadow walk and attack with a monster from a blind spot, your weapon gets +1 accuracy and sharp for the attack. So sharp is plus between 1 and 10, average over a showdown will be 5.5 extra strength. Sharp is a very strong ability. Then we have the Scale Skirt, which is when you depart, you gain survival equal to the number of blue affinities you have. More on that in a moment. And the Cycloid Scale Shoes, which require a blue puzzle and a green puzzle connected. And the movement is, you are not threatened until you attack. If you have the priority target token, gain +1 survival and remove it. So that is the fecal salve on the shoes, poop shoes, but better, because you get survival as well. Very good ability, but doesn't get used too often. The armor set bonus is +1 armor to all hit locations, meaning it's got 15 armor points across all of its locations. Low for a armor set like this. But its other ability is prismatic. This mimics the Sunstalker. Your complete affinities and incomplete affinity halves count as all colours. So this layout you see here, this is fully connected, and it is presenting to us 4 green, 4 blue and 4 red affinities simultaneously, plus a half affinity of our choice in another direction. This is just a ridiculously good ability. It is so synergous, and as a consequence, Cycloid scale armor tends to be one of the best armor sets in the game for damage dealers in the mid game and later on, as long as you can protect them. To get into what its roles are, it's a damage dealer and an archer, but to be specific in the case of archer, it wants a bow which it can move and attack with. So it doesn't want a cumbersome bow, it wants a non-cumbersome bow. For protection, a 4, most of what it's got going on is a bit of extra evasion for moving around and the ability to remove the priority target token. That's not what this armor set's trying to do. The next set of categories, layout, affinities, survival, abilities and synergies are all 10 out of 10. So to briefly explain why, layout, it doesn't care about the layout because of prismatic. Affinities, it doesn't care about the affinities because of prismatic. Survival, it gives you a ton of survival when departing, and it also can generate more survival if you get the priority target token, so it's one of the best survival generators on the departing set. Abilities, every ability is good, 10 out of 10. Synergies, this synergizes with everything. Affinity builds, it synergizes with them. Powerful weapons that just don't have enough strength, it can make them last longer by synergizing with them by giving them sharp. The only things it doesn't synergize with very well are weapons that don't want you attacking in the blind spot, but many of those weapons will just work in the blind spot anyway. And bows is about the only one I think that's not particularly great on the whole. Ironic, this bow here that depicted, which is the ink blood bow, if I remember correctly, doesn't synergize very well with Cycloid scale armor at all, but many other bows do. As long as you can move around while using it, it's great. You want that sharp, you want to be in the blind spot. Lifespan an 8, it does fall off in the end game because of armor point issues, but if you're good at supporting it, it can keep going. And cost, it's another expensive armor set to put together. It's very, very expensive and sometimes difficult, and that might be the largest drawback for it. My final score, it's a 65. This is a super, super good armor set, and to be honest, when we're talking about Node 3 armor sets, I really want to see them scoring above a 55 on average, or higher, so I'm very happy to be seeing this scoring this well. So this armor set has a bit of work to unlock. This is technically a Node 1 armor set, but you have to unlock the Bullfrogdog, which involves a bunch of steps. So typically you're only going to be fighting the Bullfrogdog around the Node 3, approaching Node 4 sort of era. So we're talking about the approach towards the late game. And this armor set is... So, it's... Before I get talking into the abilities, I'm going to talk about a thing that's called parasitic design. So, a design is parasitic if it exists in the game kind of by itself. This is something, as I build cubes for Magic, and this is something you have to kind of deal with. A big decision when you're making a more powerful cube is, do I put in the Splinter Twin Kiki Jiki combo? Not going to bother going into that if you don't know what it is, but suffice to say, it's a suite of like half a dozen or so cards that if you put them in the cube, then people will understand, oh, the Kiki Jiki Splinter Twin combo is in the cube, and you can start drafting towards it. You can't... This sort of package doesn't really have much combinations with anything else. They tend... Kiki Jiki's kind of generically okay, Splinter Twin's generically okay, but all the other cards you've added to synergize with them aren't. They're just there to work with that. And that's just an example of parasitic design. In essence, it's in the set, but it doesn't interact with anything else. The Bullfrogdog Armor is kind of like that. Not only is it parasitic in that it primarily interacts with gear from the Bullfrog Tuskworks location, it's specifically designed to work with that. When you're looking at this layout here, you want to imagine that in the bottom left corner is the Bullfrogdog shield, completing that affinity, and in the right is a Bullfrogdog weapon, completing the red affinity, bottom right, bottom left. That is pretty close to how it's baked, but on top of that, the weapons want to combine with the abilities of the Frogdog Armor set, and so on and so forth. So, It tends to be, if you're going to build Bullfrogdog Armor, you build Bullfrogdog weapons, and that's kind of it's all its own thing. And you usually only build one of these armor sets as well, because making the armor requires gathering a lot of copper. In order to get copper, you have to use an item that you can craft from hunting the level 2 Frogdog. And that item also has a bunch of issues in how you use it that sometimes mean you don't get enough copper anyway. So it's a difficult armor set to craft. But before we get into assessing it on points, let's talk about the various different abilities, starting with the helm. This is, it's worth noting, this is membrane, so this is an armor set with the ability for you to put Frogdog bits on, because of the outfit, if you remember. So you can have the Frogdog mask here instead, especially while you're gradually leveling it up. It is the blue possibility is when you depart with a heavy weapon, gain +6 insanity. So big thing this armor set's trying to do is leverage heavy, specifically heavy weapons. The arms have a red puzzle ability, red down or red left, either one. Your attacks with heavy weapons gain +1 accuracy. Again, we're seeing a bit more of that. Then the armor body piece is when you depart, you add 1 to all hit locations for each heavy weapon in your gear grid. Again, more heavy weapon synergies, heavy shields. The dress is, if connected, it requires a red puzzle and 2 more red affinities and a blue affinity. So you can see it's got most of what it needs. It just needs 1 more red affinity, which any Frogdog weapon or shield will offer. While insane, your heavy weapons gain surpass 10. So briefly now I have to talk about surpass. I always love that kind of thing. Surpass is a special rule, which is when your wound attempt total surpasses the monster's toughness by X or more, the monster suffers an additional wound. So if you manage to beat the monster's toughness by 10 or more, you will score more wounds if you're insane. Finally, on the boots, we have a up puzzle red, left puzzle blue. When you depart with a heavy weapon, gain +1 movement token. The armor set bonus is 1 armor point to all hit locations, which in addition to the Bullfrog cuirass, the body piece means we should have 9 hit points to all hit locations as long as we've got a heavy weapon in the gear grid. At 10 if we've got 2 heavy weapons, which is quite possible with a weapon and a shield. And then its ability is another monster movement one, focus charge, spend a knight and a bolt, full move in a straight line, activate a weapon to attack. This attack gets +1 accuracy for each space you move. So it's a mirror of the Phoenix armor. The key thing here is this extra accuracy is designed to work with the Bullfrogdog weapons. So if I very briefly grab one of the examples, I'm going to just pause the recording as I reopen the window. Okay, so for example, the Bullfrog Halberd. This is a 2 speed, 8+ accuracy, 5 strength spear weapon with heavy and all of that. And has extra abilities if all your attack rolls hit, so synergizing further. The Bullfrog Mace is a 2 speed, 9+ accuracy, 7 strength club. That if all of your attack rolls hit, you double your wound attempt rolls to the attack, which of course then links into the surpass, etc. This is what I mean by the set being parasitic, is it's mostly designed to work with its own armor pieces, its own weapons from the Frog's Crafter, and a little bit with the Frogdog stuff. This isn't necessarily a complete just like deal breaker for the armor set, but it can make the campaign feel awkward, because you are going to be committed into hunting the Bullfrogdog a number of times in order to build the armor set, and then additional times to try and get the weapons done, and you need all of that copper, and there's not a huge amount of things that work super well without it, although the blacksmith has some options, and you know, so it's not bad, but just be aware of how self-intensive the Frogdog expansion can be as a whole. I'll talk about that when the Frogdog finally lands on the simulator, and I'll give you a video review. I'm working on a written review while recording this now. The armor set's role is tank or off tank. Protection I've given a 9 out of 10. I've just deducted a little bit on the points front, only because of it being heavy, and I could go to a 10 at times. Layout is a 7. While it's very fixed in place, it provides a lot of stuff anyway, so it's doing pretty well. On the affinities front, I've given it an 8. It's great, actually. The only affinity it's not doing fantastic on is it's green, and it's sort of doing a different thing to prevent attacks rather than evasion, so I'm not scoring it down much for that. Survival is 0. It doesn't do anything to generate survival. It doesn't really have any good abilities that mean you need to spend survival less, so it's not getting any points there. Abilities, they're very good. These are a very good set of abilities. Very, very good. So 9 out of 10. Synergies, I've given it a 4. This is because it's parasitic. Within its own gear, it's probably a 10. In the consideration of a campaign as a whole, it does harm your cross-expansion synergies. So if you're okay with that, you could provisionally consider this score to be like 5 points higher. I'd say it's a 9 within its own stuff. But I've knocked it down here because of how it does affect everything else you're trying to do in the game for quite a while. Lifespan, a 9. Possibly could have gone with a 10 here. It lasts pretty much for the rest of the campaign once you've crafted it. It's one survivor's gear grid loadout, pretty much sorted. Cost is a 3 because of the aforementioned issues with getting enough copper, and the fact that you do need to hunt this monster at least twice to build the armor set. Considering how late this turns up in the game and you've got other things you want to be hunting at that time, it does kind of cause issues. You know, the Frogdog is to get to the Bullfrogdog requires a lot of work with the Frogdog, and that's part of the reason the cost is lowered to a lower score, because there's actually a large amount of opportunity cost involved in making this armor set. Final score of 49, sorry. You could very easily, as I say, put this up by 5-6 points if you want to, if you're very happy with hunting the Frogdog and you like all the synergies going on here. So I don't think this armor set needs any alterations or changes. I think it's pretty reasonable. It's just, I'm not a big fan of how much you end up having to hunt the same monster over and over, and that's affected my personal final score. But I could see on another day me scoring any between like the current score and going up towards 60. So this is the lowest I think I'll ever score this armor set at. It is provisional. I need more time with it. It's the armor set I've had the least time with because it's a lot of work to unlock it, and then you don't have a lot of time left in the campaign to really get to grips with how it works. Next up, we have our Node 4 armor sets. This one's more of a Node 3.5. You can start building this armor set fairly quickly. It does upgrade into a Node 4 version. I'm just going to check. I don't have that one there, but I've taken it into account into the scoring. So rolling armor comes from the Dung Beetle Knight. Before we get into the armor set itself, an important note here is not one single piece of this armor set has the armor keyword. This is intended. This means these pieces can all be used with other armor sets, and other bits of armor sets can be used with this, making this armor set the best way to take another piece of an armor set that you really like, but you don't like the rest of the armor set, and have it in a very powerful set. Rawhide Headband, you could stick it in here, no problem at all. Connect it up to the Scarab Circlet. Do you want to have your Phoenix Armor going? Hey, well, have the placard here, no problem at all. It's even got the affinities to mostly help out activating it. Brilliant. So that is a big part of what makes rolling armor so interesting, but even by itself, what it's doing is it's duplicating, it's kind of duplicating being a Dung Ball and a Dung Beetle Knight in one. So we'll go through its abilities, starting with the not head, because it isn't on a head hit location. You'll notice no hit locations on any of these. The Scarab Circlet. This gives you 1 armor point to all hit locations, and during the showdown, when your survival is reduced to 0, you gain a +1 strength token. Notably, if you have a way of then increasing your survival to 1 and then draining it back to 0, you'll get another strength token, and there are ways of generating survival every single turn, so quite a strong ability. We then have the Sentry Shoulder Pads and Greaves. I'll talk about them together. They both add 1 armor point to each hit location. When upgraded, they will add 3 armor points to all hit locations. That involves it's a process involved of calcification where you stick them in the ground and then dig them up a few years later, and hopefully they don't get ruined and then they're improved. The ability on the shoulder pads is ripple pattern. When you're attacked, you roll 1d10. On a 10+, you ignore one hit. This ripple pattern becomes stronger when you upgrade it, and also the Sentry Greaves give you +1 to all ripple pattern roll results, as long as you have a green pattern connected affinity and have a blue affinity in the gear grid. You can see we can do that no problem with this armor set. The shoulder pads want a green pattern and another green. Again, this armor set can do that no problem. The Greaves do reduce your movement by 1 though, which is worth noting. Then we have the Rubber Bone Harness. Once per showdown, you may convert all of your negative attribute tokens to positive attribute tokens of the same type. This is a really super unique ability. It absolutely rinses certain monsters who are trying to stick negative tokens on you to cause detriments. This goes, well, that's nice, I'm going to make them all into a positive, which is a huge swing. Then we have the Rainbow Wing Belt. If you have a red, green and blue in your gear grid, then when any of your attack rolls is a 1, you may re-roll them, limit once per attack. So you make your attack roll, and then any of the ones there you can re-roll them. This means that you only have a 1% chance of rolling a 1 when attacking. If your weapon's hit on a 2+, that means each attack dice only has a 1% chance of missing, for example. We used to use this with Early Iron in order to negate the drawback of Early Iron, which has you automatically fail to hit if you roll a 1. That is, of course, not the case here anymore, because we also got access to a lantern that fixes Early Iron even better. But it was a nice synergy to have for a while. It's a strong ability. Our set bonuses add 2 armor points to all hit locations, and when you would be knocked down, you instead suffer knockback 5, limit once per round. This is okay. The armor points is great. That means that at a baseline, without any upgrades, we got 5 armor points to each hit location. That's really nice. That's a good number. And it gets better with others, with the calcification process. The roll, it does whatever you like. You can put whatever bits of gear onto this you want to do. I mean, obviously it's a little bit more tanking frontline orientated, but you can play a tank support quite easily. Protection 10, easy. It's great when you get it. Ripple pattern's fantastic. It upgrades even further. It has that bonuses to the ability to flip the negative tokens. It's just great. Layout, I've given it a 6. It's a little awkward at times. This is one of the layouts that we can make work, but you'll notice we're sort of constantly juggling how we arrange things around in order to make best use of them, and we do have to get this 2 green, including a puzzle, and this second green puzzle, and a blue affinity. But we do have a few choices in how we're going to handle that. So it's not terrible, but I do often feel the squeeze when dealing with this. On survival front, 1 point because you don't have to be once per round. Instead of being knocked down, you stay on your feet, which saves a little bit of survival for others. Abilities, as I said, many of these are unique, best in class. I can't not give it a 10 on abilities. And synergies, I explained why this fits with any other bits of armor you could possibly want to combine it with, which means it's got synergies that no other armor set possibly has. And with its self-upgrading, I got to give it a 10 out of 10 as well. Cost, I've given a 2. This is expensive. If you're going to be making this armor set, you are working out this armor set, and you even then, if you want to fully upgrade it, have to stick bits in the ground, which means you need to use some alternative armor set for a bit, or have spare pieces crafted. And those might even fail to be constructed if you mess up the process. You can avoid that by spending yet more resources. So honestly, survival and cost are the only real negatives on rolling armor. Final score of 55. I'm always consistently impressed with it. But it's also, it doesn't ignite joy beyond looking really cool. Some armor sets, I look at them and I look at Dragon Armor and I'm really excited because I get to jump around the place. Or I look at Cycloid Armor and then I'm like, oh, I can use these really low strength early game daggers now again, and they have a really cool ability. So I think it's fine. I think it's great. Definitely the calcified version is probably a 60 rather than a 55. I've not accounted for that here in this scoring because this video is getting long enough as it is. I dread to think how long it's going to be because we got a fair bit left to go. Okay, right, I'm going to take a drink and then we're going to get onto our other Node 4 armor set, the real proper Node 4 armor set. Okay, so say hello to Deathking Armor. This is in the Gambler's Chest. This comes from the King. This armor set is one of the 2 best armor sets in the game for the end game, definitely. So, let's start with its abilities. The helm has while you're insane you cannot be knocked down. The body piece has you are hushed, which is a mechanic that matters when fighting the king and has some other effects like you cannot, it encourages stop being able to work for you. The gauntlets have deflect 1, and before drawing hit locations you make 1 additional attack roll. I'm still not entirely clear how this deflect 1 works. I don't know if it's when you arrive you get a deflect 1 token. That's how I've been playing it. This is one of the things which I like to see like publicly FAQ'd on the website. If somebody has the answer, please put it in the comments for other people to see. I don't know if I've been playing it right or not. I've been playing it as the worst possible it could be. If you can activate it to gain deflect 1 again, then, you know, wow. And I have a sneaking suspicion maybe that's the intention, but it's hard to say. Even without that, the like additional attack roll is nice to have. Just gain deflect 1 is solid, even if it would be only for once a showdown. And then you have the show off your King's Goin bedazzlement. So gyrate your hips at the monster, and if you're in the monster's field of view, then knock down limit once per showdown. Knocking down the monster is very strong. It can give everyone potentially a free round of attacks because you nest your attacks inside each other's with surges, and then once the first attack finally finishes, the monster, even if it's indomitable, stands up. The Deathking boots have the ability of Death Geometry. You spend a Knight and a Lightning Bolt to place yourself in an unoccupied space adjacent to a monster or survivor. If it's a survivor, you both suffer monster level brain damage. Most of the time you're teleporting next to a monster. Very, very rare you're going to be doing it any other way, especially as you can't do this during the monster's turn because it requires a Knight and a movement, and you can't do that through survival actions alone. The set bonus is... Oh God, I am having trouble reading that. I am going to just go back to my physical card. Give me one moment. Let's just pull it up. Here we are. In the Kingsmith. Now set bonus. There it is. I wanted to be sure because this is one of the ones I haven't managed to memorize particularly well. Okay, you can't see it. I'm out of memory time. Oh, it's +2. Yeah, I thought it was +2. I wasn't completely confident. And then the ability is Kinetic Discharge. If you have any tokens when you attack, gain +4 strength to the attack. Discard all your tokens when the attack ends. It's worth noting that stuff like Bleed is a token. On top of any kind of positive or negative attribute tokens or any tokens you've generated yourself or even a deflect token. So reasonably strong ability with a lot of self-sustain in there, not having to be like bandaged because you automatically bandage yourself is pretty good. Additionally, this armor set has 10 armor points per hit location plus a set bonus for a total of 12. It has tons of armor points. It has no affinities, is the biggest negative you could talk about with Deathking Armor. That means, though, it is completely layout agnostic. It doesn't care where you put its armor pieces. So as long as you don't have items that need a bunch of affinities, you can make most things work in this gear grid absolutely fine. I will note Deathking is the armor set I've along with Bullfrogdog that I've had the least time with. So everything's provisional. This has consistently impressed me a massive amount, so much that I'm very happy to build multiples of this set. So it is very, very good. It should be very, very good given how dangerous the king is as a quarry monster. Going on to scores, typically you can use it as a tank or off tank. Technically you could use it as a damage dealer, but it's so durable, it's so protective that you're probably playing a off tank damage dealer at that point. Protections are insanely good, 10 out of 10, love them. Layout, again, it's agnostic, 10 out of 10. I've given it 1 point for affinities. There are technically affinity absent builds that do like armor that doesn't have any affinities in it, so it gets a point. Because it's no affinities at all isn't always a negative. Survival, I'm giving it a 1, because it has a fair amount of like self-sustain. The fact that nobody has to run up and bandage you to debleed you or anything like that does save on survival costs. The abilities are all amazing, 10 out of 10. Synergies, a 5. It doesn't have any real specific synergies. It's just really good. Really, really good. And it actually has some negative synergies if you need token-related stuff going on, because it keeps taking them away from you. But it's okay if like you generate the tokens during your turn and then the armor set takes them away. So that's why I went with a 5. Lifespan 10. It's going to last the rest of the campaign. You might even want 2 of them, like I said. And the cost is a 9. The king is really nicely designed for crafting Deathking armor in that it's a cheap, it's not a high number of resources, because they've taken into account the quality of the resources. King resources are difficult to get, so they have a lot of intrinsic value. As a consequence, spending 1 or 2 king resources on a gear card is worth still as much as spending like 3, 4 or 5 on something else. This gives me a current final score of 65. Again, this is provisional. This armor set is one of the ones I'm least confident with. I need a lot more time with it, but I do absolutely feel it is amazingly strong and one of the best 2 endgame armor sets for sure. And the other one requires a lot of work to make, so this is overall probably the best endgame armor set. Yeah, and the score reflects that. I could possibly see this score going up a little bit more if we get additional synergies around tokens, for example. It's the only thing that's ever going to hold this back under this scoring system is the survival and affinity situation. Survival and affinity situation. Okay, so we're on to a few hybrid armor sets now. We're going to begin with the Lion Knight hybrid armor sets. This is Dancer Armor. So I'm not going to repeat the abilities on all of these. That should make them a bit faster, except for the set bonuses, because these are all made up of bits from other armor sets. Where there's a unique piece, I will talk about that, like the set bonus, but otherwise we're going to brush over it mostly. So this is Phoenix Helm, Rawhide Vest, Leather Skirt, Screaming Braces and Leather Boots. It gives you a square block of 4 that all connect together and get their abilities online. Those abilities include 2 evasion tokens and extra interacting with the terrain. The boots are kind of free for you to connect if you want to, you don't have to. This means the armor set is close to being a monster grease set. The abilities are, while you're wearing this, you may use the tumble fighting art. That means you get to ignore collisions half the time. And at the end of your first attack during your act, you gain a knight and you may move ability. So this armor set is very, very mobile. I especially like it with bows, because you can shoot by firing a cumbersome bow with your movement and shot, and then you get a second movement which you can then use to scoot. So you can act like artillery does, where you move, you shoot, and then you move somewhere else, making it hard for retaliations. The monster struggles to get to you if you shoot and then move out of its movement range, for example. This is just a very good generic armor set, and it's nice that it's using bits like the Rawhide Vest and increasing their overall armor points. It has 15 armor points across all. So it's good at damage, it's good at arching. It does have, you could play an evasion dash cancel tank, but that falls off fairly quickly. Because of its extreme mobility and innate evasion, it has good base protection even though its armor points are not super high. I like its layout a lot. A block of 4 that you move around the place is pretty easy to build around. And you can break it apart if you have matching affinities to plug the gaps together, so I found it to be very, very flexible. Its affinities, as mentioned, it's halfway to blue, it's halfway to monster tooth, it's very close, like halfway to monster grease, so it's doing everything I want there. Survival, we don't really have any survival gains on here, but we do have to dash less when using this armor set, which is nice. Synergies, beyond bow and a few sort of offensive ones, it doesn't have any direct synergies with anything really in particular. It's a bit kind of more generic. Lifespan, I've given it a 7 because you have to be able to craft the Phoenix Helm, meaning you're in the mid game at the first point you can make this. Cost, you're recycling parts from other armor sets, especially the Rawhide, that's quite cheap, so it's a relatively cheap armor set. Gives me a final score of 53. Dancer Armor has fallen down a bit in the rankings, not because it's gotten worse, but because other armor sets have gotten better. Additionally, on cost, you have to unlock this, and that is done by spending some extra resources and actions during the settlement phase, so it is a bit more expensive to make than just the pure costs listed. Next of the trio, we have Brawler Armor. This one has a couple of gear cards that haven't appeared before. The Skull Helm, there's nothing special about the Skull Helm here, it's just its ability to actually blanked off, because it's a negative ability and the armor set bonus gets rid of that, so it's providing a down red affinity. The Lion Skin Cloak is the really exciting part of this. It reduces damage for every hit suffered by 1 to a minimum of 1. This is a rare ability we don't see too often, and the fact that Brawler Armor is carrying it and gets a good amount of armor points is something special. The greaves are, giving us extra movement. The White Line Gauntlet is doing absolutely nothing at all. Our set bonus is your Skull Helm cannot be destroyed. You get +2 accuracy when attacking with Fist and Tooth, and when you're knocked down you gain +1 strength token. In essence, when you get knocked down, you get back up again and you punch even harder. Just keep tub thumping. Ultimately, while this armor set is suggesting a Fist and Tooth orientation, it's generally better with weapons that have the Fist and Tooth keyword rather than pure Fist and Tooth itself. Brawler Armor for a while was kind of okay. It's gotten better when you use it with the Crimson Crocodile, because the Crimson Crocodile has a melee arm weapon, Fist and Tooth, the Immortal Arm, that's really, really good. So Brawler Armor has kind of improved over time, getting to its points. It's got great protection, even though it's only got 20 armor points total. It actually has way more than that because of how the cloak works. Layout, I've given it a 10 because it is agnostic to its positioning. It doesn't need any of these affinities to be connected, they're just there. But that also ties into one of its bigger weaknesses. It's got not many affinities at all, and it doesn't much have in the way of getting them. On the survival front, it's you have to dodge less, that's why I've given it a point, but it doesn't really generate survival. Abilities, this is the big thing. This is the big thing that I like about Brawler Armor. So 8 for abilities, they're good abilities. Synergies are 7, like I said, it's got nice Fist and Tooth synergies, and more Fist and Tooth style weapons crop up, it gets better and better at that. But it's also got good synergies with any form of damage soak, damage preventation, and shields. Lifespan, a 7, does fall off in the end game, but it's very reliable until then. Cost, a 6. The main reason it's a little expensive on top of having Phoenix pieces is that Lion Skin Cloak needs to be crafted. Worth noting that the White Gigaline makes this armor set even better as well. Final score 49. I think this is very reasonable for a armor set that just lacks so much in affinities. It's mostly the surviving affinities that are pulling this back. And the fact that it's using a gear card that usually you don't craft, but I just got to say Lion Skin Cloak has gotten better since we've had the addition of Clothed and Satiated. So it's around where it needs to be. The only way I think it could be better is if this gear card, which I've talked about in the past, was better. This thing's a disappointment, and it does nothing here. We don't pounce with Brawler Armor. Meh. Okay, final one of this trio is Warlord Armor. So this is using Screaming Horns, Phoenix Placard, Leather Braces, Lantern Greaves, and Lantern Mail. You can see immediately that this armor set has the Phoenix Placard active, meaning it's always available for you. And it has Lantern Greaves, so technically you could choose to not activate the Placard and get the extra movement from the Greaves. That is an option. I prefer the Placard active, but there are arguments that having 7 movement is possibly better than the Placard, depending on the monster you're fighting, so it's nice to have those options. It has 25 armor points, very, very respectable, +1 speed and +1 luck when attacking with axes, and then separately, when you critically wound, all other non-death survivors gain +1 survival and +2 strength until the end of the round. So this has axe synergies. You're not forced to use them, because it also just synergizes well with deadly weapons as a whole. So if your weapon that's really good at scoring critical wounds happens to not be an axe, that's okay. You can still benefit from the survival and strength gains. This armor set is used as a tank, off-tank, or damage dealer. It is great at all of them. Protection 8, mostly just held back a bit by the inability to have really good monster grease synergy, but it's close. It's really close, you know? It's very close. If you can do an up and down green connected, you can get monster grease going on this armor set. It's just more of... I'd have given the score this higher, but the newer armor sets are so good at protection that this one's just fallen off through age. Layout of 4, it's a little limited. It needs to make that T, that inverted T. Affinity 6, as I said, it's like halfway to blue, which is nice. It's halfway to green, which is nice. It's halfway to red, which is nice. But it struggles a little bit. Ideally, I'd want it to be good at green and blue. That can be very, very hard to put together. Not impossible, but hard. Survival gains. Not only does it give you 2 survival, the survival from the braces, the 2 survival, it generates more survival for other members of your group. So I can't not give it a very good score for that. Likewise, the abilities. These are great abilities. Synergies, as I said, axe and deadly, they're the main things it synergizes with, but also it's nice with shields because it has the Phoenix Placard on it. Lifespan a 9, this one pretty much lasts for the rest of the campaign if you want it to, and a cost of 6, it's got lantern pieces in it. These are expensive, this is expensive, but these two are like cheap in comparison, so you'll probably have them laying around the place. So final score of 59, and I think this is a very respectable mid transition into late game armor set that I'm very happy to use whenever I can. Time for another quick drink because my voice is going a bit. I'm going to push through to the end in this one recording session though. We're going to look at the Black Knight armor next. First up we have Count armor. So Black Knight armor is a little unusual in that you have to beat the Black Knight and then find the pattern pieces during the victory by raiding the vault, and then you have to construct the armor from the patterns. The tricky part of all that is it's very, very difficult to build more than one armor set in a campaign. If you are going to manage 2, Count armor is probably going to be one of those 2, because technically you can generate an extra piece. But typically you should count on just making one of these. Count on the count. Okay. Another side note, I'm still very disappointed that the Count Armor artwork here, which is the female Count Armor set, is not depicted in a physical model. Same with the other armor sets in this, they all only have one of the 2 sexes represented. Anyway, Count armor set. This, as you can see, is a green and red armor set. It is very damage orientated. We'll walk through its abilities so you understand. So first of all, we've got the Count Treku. This has the Shred ability. During your act, you may spend an attribute token to activate a melee weapon and attack, limit once per round. So, spending attribute tokens. And notice it isn't saying positive or negative, it's just saying attribute token. And that'll give you an extra attack during your act. So, effectively, if you have a way of generating or gaining attribute tokens, or the monster is putting attribute tokens on you, you can convert them into extra attacks. So that's a pseudo surge. The Count Wrappings have on arrival, lose 2 survival and gain +2 strength tokens. You need 2 of its red affinities connected, and you need 4 total in the gear grid. This layout you can see here is one sample way of getting close to that. We are needing to add 2 more red affinities onto the gear grid. I'll talk more about the layout in a moment. Then we have the Count Tabard. This needs 3 greens connected. On arrival, lose 1 survival and gain a +1 speed token. So obviously this token's here for extra attack speed, but it's also giving you the ability to shred. Shame we don't have a really cool guitar to go with the Count Armor, eh? And then on the Count Sandals, this requires a green puzzle connected. On arrival, lose 1 survival and gain +1 movement token. Very strong movement tokens. Okay, its set bonus adds 2 armor points to all hit locations for a total of 4 on each location, 20 total. When you attack with a melee weapon, if it is not your first attack this round, you cancel any wound on hit locations, draw any wound reactions. Very strong, helps with aggressive armor sets if you get to cancel reactions. This will also synergize even further with any other sort of ways of cancelling reactions, like say Qatar specialization. So you can ignore the wounds already, and then you could like ignore the first failure that you roll thanks to Qatar. So things to consider in respect to that. So the layout, as we can see, is a little awkward. You need to get 2 reds connected on the Count Wrappings, you need to get 3 greens connected on the Tabard, 1 green on the Sandals. It does have a lot of affinities to give you options to connect up. But one big key thing to note here is this armor set leans into green and red instead of red and blue. Red and blue is the offensive colour combination, red and green is the off-tank colour combination, but this armor set can't off-tank. It does not have enough armor points for when you craft it. Again, if you do want to craft this one though, craft it be the first one of these armor sets you craft from the Black Knight, and try and get it together as quickly as possible. I would generally only try and make Count Armor if you gain a pattern from it for free, which can happen during one of the story events leading up to the Black Knight. So its primary role, in fact its only role, is damage. I've given it a 6 for protection because even though it has lower armor points, it is mobile and it is able to ignore reactions, so it only really needs its armor points for withstanding attacks rather than also suffering consequences of attacking. Layout I've given a 6 because even though it has a lot of affinities, it is awkward, it is hard to optimize a layout. That is always interesting. This is a armor set that constantly asks you to think about how you're building your gear and putting it together to support, which I like. Survival though is 0. It's technically got this pseudo survival surge ability, but I'm not giving it a point there because it's actually paying quite a heavy cost to activate that in losing the attribute tokens most of the time. You could add a 1 point of survival onto it for scoring if you have ways of generating positive or negative attribute tokens, or if the monster's doing that. So I could see myself giving it another point in survival somewhere else. I think I was a little harsh on this Count Armor. I'd come off playing a campaign where it was really being frustrating, so that may have affected my score slightly. But as I said, this is again provisional as a newer set, so it takes time to really figure out. There's so many combinations in Kingdom Death now that you can just miss stuff no matter how much time you spend playing. So again, like all of these newer ones from Frogdog, Gambler's Chest, all of those, maybe I'll have stronger, more defined opinions on them in the future. Okay, abilities, I've given it a 9. I think its abilities are really good. It's had really, really good abilities. The synergies are 5. As I said, the Qatar synergy is an obvious one. Otherwise, it's quite sort of generic. And it is struggling because the colours of its affinities are wrong for the playstyle it's looking to do. This is very much leaning into a strength-orientated playstyle. But I would love to have it in a luck-orientated playstyle, because if you're ignoring wound reactions and you're critically wounding to ignore even more reactions, you are in a really good spot as a damage dealer. But you want blue affinities to support that, and this doesn't have any. Makes it very interesting. It doesn't have a cookie colour luck build answer, and it's trying to encourage you to play a strength build instead, which I think is still neat. Lifespan, I've given it a 4. I'll be honest, once you craft this, it's kind of sunsetting. It's running out of time. It becomes hard to push it for a long period because it really does struggle with its armor points once the monster damage climbs up. If you look at this and you go, okay, well, I've got what, like three armor points on my head. I'm gonna once again double check this set bonus here. This is one of those ones I don't have memorized again. I do apologize for that, but I have my reference sheet right here. Count armor, yeah, there it is. It's 2, so it's got 4 armor points. Yeah, I was vaguely remembering correctly. We've overshot. Let's go back. So, if you take 5 damage from a single source, which is possible in the end game, it'll just cut straight through the count armor this way. And even with a shield, you won't have enough to soak a second attack like that. I know 5 sounds like a big number, but it really isn't once you're talking about end game kind of stuff, and we're having more of those monsters turning up in the future. So I think it just sort of this is a mid game armor set, early late game, but end game it's not cutting it. Really isn't. I wouldn't want to take this against the king. I tried. It wasn't fun. Cost a 5. It's reasonable. It's not amazing. What's to say? It's an expensive process to get these armor sets, and there's a lot of opportunity costs. Whichever one you craft, you can't get the others. And I don't think this is the best one of those options. I think it's the weakest of the 3. It always would be. It's just struggling to keep up with the other 2 armor sets, which we're going to look at in a moment. The final score of 40. As I say, maybe that's a few points higher, but not much. This is a sort of frustrating armor set to use. Okay, Earl Armor. So, Earl Armor is our blue and green armor set. It's our second most expensive armor set. It is a tanking support based armor set, and it has the right colours for this. Blue and green especially are what we want for this kind of armor set. So, walk through the abilities. Earl Jaw Guard, your encourage affects all knockdown survivors. This is really good. Earl Raiment, if you have the puzzles active, which is a green and a blue, and it's got like tons, you can see them, tons of affinities. My voice is going, I'm having to shortcut a little bit. Whenever you encourage, you roll 1d10, and on a 6+, all affected survivors gain +1 survival, and remember, your courage affects all knocked down survivors. Then we have the Earl Sleeves. When you encourage, all affected survivors gain a deflect token. That's really nice. The Tacits have, when you depart, gain +3 survival. I like seeing this much survival gain on an armor set that's viable in the mid and late game. It's really nice to just get a good number there. Its set bonus is 2 armor points to all hit locations, and you double any bonuses gained by other survivors when you encourage. So double that survival gain, double those deflect tokens. Really, really, really good. If you have any kind of ability which lets you encourage survivors regardless of whether they're knocked down or not, Earl Armor just becomes insane. But even without it, I am so unbelievably impressed with this armor set, and the only critique I have is I wish that this picture here for the Earl Armor set bonus had a miniature, because I love that miniature, well, that artwork. I love this armor set. I'm not going to beat around the bush, okay? This is my jam. You can use this as a support, you can use this as a tank. It even has enough blue affinities. Look, it's got 1, 2, and 2 halves. It's nearly got 4 affinities just by itself to run the blue charm and play as a Lancer. And that's quite rare. To have a tanking Lancer running into the end game is phenomenal. Really love it. Protection, 10 out of 10. Not only has it got solid protections itself with a good amount of armor points there, we're talking 5 on each hit location, it's also providing deflect tokens for survivors and giving survivors survival. The layout, I can't see how this layout could ever be any better. It's the pieces that you need to connect only require a small number of affinities to be puzzle connected. Everything else is very optional. I've shown a layout here that just tries to maximize the number of spare affinities kicking around. There's loads of others. Like, the only thing we need to do is connect the raiment to either the tassets or the boots, and the Earl jaw guard to something, probably the raiment, but it could be connected to the Earl sleeves. We got so many options in how we configure these. You don't just have to follow this one here. Survival gains, it's giving knockdown survivors extra survival. It's got +3 survival itself. It's best in class, really. There's nothing out there doing what it does. Likewise, it's got tons of unique abilities that I cannot score less than a 10. Handing out deflect tokens is amazing, even if it's conditional when you get them. Synergies, a 6. I think it has, as I said, spear synergies with the blue charm. Beyond that, it is a bit more kind of generic and mostly asking you to be frontline with a shield. And the cost is expensive. This is an expensive armor set. I cannot score it highly on the cost front because of the issues with Black Knight armor, opportunity costs, and just crafting costs itself. But I am always happy when I craft this. I will always try to make this armor set, which is a detriment to the other 2 armor sets. Unfortunately, that's my playstyle, and then I will run it for the rest of the campaign and be really happy with it and do everything I can to encourage synergies as much as possible, because I just, this is my favourite armor set in the game now. This and Crimson Crocodile Armor, that's my 1 and 2 now these days. Our third armor set is the Marchioness Armor. So this always reminds me of the Marquis de Cat from Root. Same root word. Root. This is a sword-based tank / off tank that kind of focuses around a sort of fencing style. It completes our trifecta by being the red and blue. I wish this one was the red and green armor set and the Count one was the red and blue, but Marchioness does very well with the blue affinities. It doesn't mind having them at all, so that's okay. This is one sample layout. The only thing we're really trying to do is make sure that the gloves are connected. We've got a block of 4 and a loose single extra piece of gear. We can always break and move these around a little bit. Only the Marchioness gloves have severe requirements, and on their connections you can be a little bit flexible, but on the whole this is probably the layout that I'd stick with. We have 2 complete blues, 2 complete reds, and then the ability to connect more reds and blues as we want. Our abilities are on the Gorget. On arrival, non-death survivors gain +2 survival. We love on arrival survival gains. That's really strong. The blouse has swords in your gear grid without deflect, gain deflect 1. Swords in your gear grid that already have deflect increase the effect by 1. So this allows me to touch back to, which people probably will be commented on. It's likely that the Deathking armor set is you activate it to gain the deflect token. But again, I really wish it had been labelled better if that's actually what it's doing, because that's not how it's templated, which is frustrating. Okay, so the gloves, if you activate them with a red puzzle, blue puzzle, and an extra red and a blue, then when you block or deflect a hit, you gain 1 activation at the start of your next act, a limit once per round. So this allows you to spend your blocks or deflects, turning them into activations, and creates this like attack riposte, parry riposte kind of playstyle, which is why I said this is like a fencing armor. And then the Solarettes have +2 movement while you have a sword in your gear grid. Extra movement's great. You're always going to have a sword in your gear grid unless somehow it got smashed on the way in, which you've got other problems then. Our set bonus is swords in the gear grid gain the finesse keyword. That does have some synergies with the polishing lantern. It allows for somebody else to have the polishing lantern and act as your squire, which is a fun little extra touch that I always like. I love the squire playstyle. I like that it gets more and more support. When you riposte, you gain a movement at the start of your next act. So we can now see how it's sort of very agile, very mobile, very front line, very centre of everything. If you want to get an experience of what it's like to use this armour set, you can play the Squires of the Citadel Black Knight mini campaign, and one of the characters uses this armour set and is set up to take advantage of it, and it's a fun introduction to see how it plays, which is nice to have a chance to try before you buy in-game. On the scoring, it's a tank off-tank set. Protection 9, very close to a 10. It's great, it's very self-sustaining, it's very defensive. The layout I've given it an 8 because it is good, but it does have that kind of big, chunky 2x2 block that can be awkward to navigate, and it does have some specific demands for its puzzle affinities. Given an 8 for its affinities, I think they are great. The very fact that we can play with deadly swords is really sweet. So it's strong, and these affinities are both colours it likes using. Survival, an 8. It's generating a lot of its own extra actions, so it tends to be a bit sustained, but also it has that nice ability that it gives everyone extra survival on arrival. I always love that is like rhymes. Survival on arrival. And then on the abilities, decorate. So many of these are great abilities. Gaining extra actions, gaining deflect, gaining extra movement. Amazing abilities. Very, very, very good armor set. And synergies. These are all sword orientated really, so I can't score it super high because it's quite focused in what it's doing, but what it is doing is really strong. Lifespan of 10. Once you've crafted it, you should use it for the rest of the campaign. Cost, I've given it a 2. It's very expensive, and if you're making Marchioness Armor, you're giving up probably the opportunity to make Earl Armor, which I think is a high cost. If I could make Earl Armor and Marchioness Armor in the same campaign easily, I would be really, really happy. I've not managed to make both of them in the same campaign. I don't know if it's possible. We'll see. Final score, 61. Okay, Pattern Armors, Gambler's Chest, Sprinter Armor. Okay, this is White Lion and Screaming Armor set pieces mixed together. We've got the unique pattern gear, the Sprinter Helm, and then we have the White Lion coat and White Lion gauntlet, so pounce synergy. We have the Screaming skirt and Screaming leg warmers, so get a little bit of insanity. The Sprinter Helm is has an up and down facing red, and it wants them puzzle connected. It gives you +1 movement while insane, so the gaining insanity on arrival from the Screaming leg warmers is very relevant here. And if you have the puzzle ability of red active, then when you pounce you move your full movement and you get to ignore the first reaction. This is a very damage orientated set. It has some nice protections in that it has got 20 armor points, and it does some good stuff with pounce. Like, this is a lot better with pounce, but I'm afraid that is kind of where a lot of my positives end with this armor set. It is hard to make this armor set. It is awkward to activate, it is awkward to use, and I found that it falls off very quickly. And again, the main candidate is this White Lion gauntlet and its terrible lack of affinities. Please give this an up facing red affinity, please. Just so many things would be fixed. I'm looking at the score on this slide, and I feel like maybe I was a little harsh, but I've used this a few times, and I've always ended up tossing it into storage and ignoring it, or building a mixed set instead of the hybrid set, because this just, like, all you really want is the coat and the Sprinter Helm, and the rest of this I'd rather other things going on. Not even the gauntlets are particularly great. So its only role is dealing damage. It's got a 5 for protection because it does have good protection for a damage dealing armor set, but its layout is a 2, even though we've got a bunch of like agnostic positional things that don't really need to be anywhere. You'll notice that it's just very awkward to try and get stuff laid out. This always has to be somewhere in the middle row, and you need to get this active, and you need 2 more gear cards to activate it. It doesn't generate any survival, so it's got nothing for survival. I do rate its abilities. I think they are very good abilities. They're not blowing their doors off, but they're still good. Synergies, I give it a 6 because it's got synergies with more than just daggers and katars. So you can pounce with other things, and pouncing with reach weapons is a classic, but we've been over this again. I can't score the it works with reach melee weapons highly because that's so many armor sets. Lifespan, I gave it a 5, and I feel like I was being generous there because I felt bad about the score I was giving this. Cost, a 4. This is way harder to build than you would think. It is difficult to get the Sprinter Helm, very difficult, and when you do get it all done, it can crop up at like a random time where it's far too late in the campaign for it to be relevant, which is frustrating. It gives it a final score of 35. It's suffering from White Lion Syndrome like the others. As I say, I could see this going up to a 40 easily if the White Lion Gauntlets just had better affinities. An up-facing red affinity is all I want for Christmas. Okay, next up, Imitation Butcher Armor. So this is our cosplay as the Butcher armor set. It has leather skirt, leather braces, leather boots, and then the lantern cuirass. So you need the blacksmith open to make this. So this means this is a late game armor set. The Imitation Butcher mask provides 4 armor points to the head, although the set as a whole is a hybrid 5, so it's 25 armor points, 5 at every location. The abilities of the Imitation Butcher mask are -2 to all brain trauma rolls, and then if you have a red puzzle and then 2 more red and a blue at the start of your act, if you're insane, you gain an extra activation. So you're more likely to die from brain trauma. So if you want to play with Imitation Butcher Armor, you probably want to have accepted darkness. And you want other survivors who can help bump up the Butcher Armor's insanity. The set bonus for this is +2 movement, which cancels out the -2 movement on the cuirass if you don't want to get the cuirass active. You can also have the leather boots easily active to get that extra little bit of movement. There's some flexibility in how you lay this out. If you want to have the cuirass in the middle and get it active, it's possible, but I think if you're not activating the Butcher mask, you're kind of wasting the point of this. And you can see here, we've got 5 slots to put together another 3 red affinities, one of which has to face downwards and connect to the Butcher mask. This is actually more awkward than it looks, but one of the things we get is on arrival we gain the Infectious Lunacy status card, which is a really good status card to have when the Butcher's not around. And while you're frenzied, you ignore monster attack rolls of an 8+, which that is very powerful. That is 30%. It's decreasing the monster's accuracy, and in a really interesting way. Because it's just ignoring those attack rolls. It doesn't even care. Like a 10, it's ignoring a 10. Yeah, get out of it. Get out of here. It doesn't matter you rolled a 10. I ignore it. It's very strong. It also has some additional synergies with the cleavers that come with the Killennium Butcher, so that's really nice. On the whole, the only issues with this armor set are the awkwardness of the layout and the cost. You know, it's not cheap. You have to get a Lantern Cuirass, that's expensive. This is pretty much a damage dealer. It's very aggressive. You don't really want to tank with it because the ignoring rolls ability isn't something you have a massive amount of control over. And I mean, you could technically run a shield and use your extra insanity to like block every turn or deflect, but considering everything you're trying to do, maybe you should just like stick to grabbing a pair of cleavers and cosplaying as the Butcher, because that's way more fun and that's how it works. So we have a 6 for protection. It's okay, it's not bad. For when you get it, it's fine. I've been happy with the protections, but I can't score it higher than this because of the negative on the mask. Affinities are 6. They has some solid affinities in here. You know, you can easily do monster grease if you want it. You can easily get the Curious active with a little bit of help. It's sort of lacking in red affinities though, which is that's the bit that this armor set probably wants. So that's why I've only scored it a 6. Survival, we've got 5. It's gained some survival in departing. It's got a pseudo survival, like free surge, free quote unquote surge. If you're insane and you have the mask active, that's all very nice. Abilities are 9. Its abilities are amazing. That's the main reason you want to play it. Synergies at an 8. It's got a ton of different synergies. It's got metal keyword on it. It is providing a bunch of like things where you can use extra activations. That's really nice to have as extra synergies and everything. It's just kind of combos with so many things that on paper you don't notice until you start playing with it, but insane synergies by themselves are absolutely fantastic. Lifespan an 8. I find it falls off in the end game, but all the way through the mid game and late game it does quite well. Obviously the mid game starts to end once you have blacksmith armor. Cost is a 4 because it's not easy to make this mask, and the Curious is expensive, and you do end up having to pay for a bunch of other gear cards to try and get this layout sorted out. And also, for some reason, Butcher Cleavers don't have any red affinities. Boo! They should. The Kelenian ones especially should. A final score of 48, which means it's perfectly respectable. Mostly, the reason it hasn't scored higher is because of that having the Lantern Curious, which means that the time you craft this, you're starting to move on to better armor sets. So, last of all, we have the Beast Hunter Armor. This is a Phoenix and Screaming Armor mixed set. It has the placard, the braces, the leg warmers, and the Phoenix folds. So it has a decent selection of affinities. Its unique piece of gear is the Beast Hunter Helm. This headgear is select an AI from the discard pile and place it on top of its basic action. The next time the monster performs its basic action, it performs a selected card at -1 speed instead. This is a unique ability. This is a very powerful ability, and if you have ways of forcing the monster to perform basic actions like the Riot Mace, you can lock the monster into performing a very unbeneficial action for it for the rest of the showdown. There's so many tricks you can do with this because of how unbelievably unique it is, and even at its absolute flaw, you can look at a terrifying AI card that's just performed and gone, yeah, I don't want you to have that, so we're going to stick it on top of the basic action, and if the monster doesn't call basic actions, you may not have to deal with that for the rest of the game. Very, very, very strong. Not great against the Phoenix. I think Phoenix tends to do basic action quite a bit, but otherwise I love what this is doing. The set bonus, first of all, 5 armor points to each location, and it is providing the fainting shot ability, so you spend your knight and bolt to move your survivor 3 spaces away from the monster, then you activate an attack with a bow or arrow in your gear grid. This attack gains +3 accuracy and +3 range, so the +3 range makes up for you having retreated. So this is another shoot and scoot. It feels like it's learnt from Dancer Armor how to do this. This armor set is amazing. It is a damage support armor set. It's got great protection with the mobility and armor points that it has. It has a lovely layout with really the Phoenix placard being the only awkward spot, and it's covering a lot of what you want the placard to be doing. It has a good selection of affinities. I especially appreciate the double red because bows tend to like strength, but we're close to just getting luck or active as well, and we don't really mind about the green ones. We don't need anything more than that 1 green active, which is nice. Abilities, no survival because it doesn't gain any survival anywhere, but abilities are 10 out of 10, unique, incredible. Love that we have a bow armor set, and I love on top of that it has a great support ability that has multiple different uses and has a very high skill ceiling. I'm sure there's going to be tricks people perform with this armor set that I go like, wow, because I love seeing that kind of stuff. When somebody does something I hadn't even thought of, it's like, oh yes, hell yes. And Beast Hunter Armor, I think, is one of those ones that in the future I'm going to be looking at and going, nice, that is a smart thing you've done. Synergies, an 8. It's exclusively bows and arrows, but it does them really well. Lifespan, a 9. I've used this for pretty much the rest of the campaign. Cost, I can't score it highly on cost because Phoenix Placard parts are expensive, and you know, even though Screaming Armor is kind of cheap, the Beast Hunter Helm isn't. It's semi-expensive itself, but that's a final, very respectable score of 54. And as my recording says, I've been going at this for today only nearly 3 hours. I think we're approaching the final armor set, at least I hope so. It is Green Armor. So Green Armor is basically a whole campaign in itself to craft it. Once you've crafted the armor, at the moment it's pretty much going to smash everything in the game, but it is going to be a part of its own campaign in Campaigns of Death. Green Armor allows you to cosplay as the Verdant Lord. It is an armor set that comes from a whole bunch of different sources. I'm not going to go through all of that here. I'm just going to briefly walk through each of the pieces of the armor set and then gush about how ridiculously good this is. So we have the green helm, gives you +1 luck as standard, and when the monster attacks you, you can choose to take the hit on the head and roll 1d10, and on a 6+ you ignore the hit, and if you're adjacent to the monster, it suffers 1 wound as you stab it with the helm horn. So that means you convert the roll to a head, and then you roll to see if you can prevent it. The green gloves, if you have both reds connected, give you +2 strength normally, and then +6 luck when attempting to wound parry hit locations. The green plate, if all are connected, it gives you +1. You draw 3 tactics cards at the start of the showdown, and then if you have all of the puzzle affinities connected, then when you attack, your next weight gains leverage, and you get the club keyword, giving you club synergies on top of the fact that you have a sword in your gear grid anyway, and a shield. Then we have the green folds. They give +1 evasion normally, and then for a blue and green affinity, after drawing hit locations for attack, you may discard 1 first strike hit location, so you can look at that and go, well, that's going to mess with my attack, get out of here. That's nice to have that option. Green boots give you the tumble fighting art as standard. We talked about that before with Dancer Armor. It's nice, 50% chance on collisions and stuff. If both greens are connected, then you successfully tumble on a 2+ instead of a 6+. That's really good. And then the other members of this armor set are Griswoldo, which is a sword, 3 speed, 4+ accuracy, 15 strength, sharp, deadly, savage, and when you wound, you block 2 with Fetosaurus for free. I wouldn't be surprised to see Fetosaurus upgraded to include some deflect tokens in the future, but even as is right now, it's really good. And Fetosaurus, the cheese shield, is 2 5+ 9 shield. It has block 2 and has 1 armor point to all hit locations, and while you carry this, you reduce the monster level by 1. So if it's a level 3 monster, it's now a level 2. I believe it's a level 1 monster, it's now a level 0. This is a really powerful ability, and actually I will often, if I'm playing this campaign, craft multiple Fetosauruses because they're not unique. You can have more of them, and they stack on top of each other, which can trivialize monsters quite a bit. Some of their actions just get disabled. So this is unusual because it is a 7-slot armor set, but you can see it just forms this diamond in your gear grid, gives you 2 extra spaces. It has Monster Tooth Necklace, it has Green Charm, it has Monster Grease, and it has Lucky Charm synergies. When it comes to scoring, this is a hard carry armor set. I cannot score it less than a 10 for its protection, layout, and affinities. It gets nothing for survival because it doesn't generate them. It gets a 10 for its abilities, an 8 for its synergies because they're mostly baked into it already, so it's very self-contained and parasitic. Its lifespan is a 10. Once you have it, it's going to last you the rest of the campaign, and the campaign is all about making it. The cost is one of the other things I can't score it highly on, just because it is a lot of effort and work to craft. But the journey is part of the entire whole experience of making this thing, and its final score gets a 64, which is very high. It would be higher if it just had more on the survival front. Just because I've chosen to score survival separately, that's the only reason it has dropped a little. So it's really good. And that means we come to the very final section of this, which is where I'm going to put all these together and give you some final rankings. Then we get to my quote-unquote tier list before my voice gives out, hopefully. First era, so this is the Rawhide era. Node 1's is as follows. Rawhide, followed by Crimson, followed by Frogdog, and then Gorment with White Sunlion and White Lion quite a distance behind the others. I think the first three of these are all in a great position. I've talked about what I think with the other three. Mostly it's affinity issues and protection issues with the armor sets not doing what they're supposed to be doing. In Era 2, which is our Rawhide 2 leather, we have Vagabond at the top because of how nuts Vagabond is at being a better leather set. Then Leather, and then Singing, and then below that Screaming Sun, Screaming, Tide, Gorment, the 5-slot Gorment, and then Silk, and then Count and Sprinter. Out of all of these, Screaming and above I think are all in pretty solid places. As I said, I'd like a little bit more protection on Screaming Armor, and I've been through the others. I think Count maybe could be up a bit, but I don't think I'd rate Count above Gorment, the 5-slot Gorment, because Count isn't as unique as that. Era 3, which is our Lantern Armor era, so Node 3 and similar, is as follows. Earl taking the top slot, Cycloid Scale in second, and Refined Lantern in third. But we also have very respectable placements for Marchioness, Rolling, Dragon, Beast Hunter Armor, the normal Refined Armor, Dancer Armor. They're all great. And even Sunlantern Armor and Lantern Armor, sorry, those two should be the other way around in the list. Hang on, I need to go. I'm going to go check something. Give me one moment. Yeah, it is correct. Correct number, wrong slot. It was a long time ago I wrote this, and I forgot to move it down when I was sorting everything out. Of all of these, I think every single armor set is in a relatively good spot. With Phoenix only being at the bottom, mostly because of teething pains with affinities. And remember, if we're including the IR, the Indomitable Resources, I think Phoenix is up to 51 easily at least, meaning every single one of these armor sets is roughly where I'd expect it to be. Era 4, our late game era, scores as follows. There we are. Deathking, Green Armor. I've actually put Indomitable Phoenix Armor in here. Ooh, there we go, 58. I did score it, I just forgot the slides with everything I was doing. And then Calcified Rolling Armor is 54. That means all of these are very, very acceptable, very nicely scored. And finally, here is my personal tier list, best per era. In the Rawhide era, it is Rawhide, Crimson and Frogdog. In the Leather era, mid-game, it is Vagabond, Leather and Singer. In the late game, which is the Lantern era, it's Earl, Cycloid Scale and Refined Lantern. And in the Thanos endgame era, it is Deathking, Green and Calcified Rolling Armor. And no matter how much I might quibble back and forth about my individual points, these I would not be putting anything else in the top 3 for each era. So these are my 12 top armor sets. These are the armor sets I am going to be looking to craft. And the only one I have any quibble about is Vagabond Armor. And even then I think that's reasonable, unless without the black sword interaction. So there we are. That's it. We got there. And I don't know, I'm guessing it's going to be in over 3 hours. We'll have to see. That's it. That is my full presentation on armor as it stands. And I greatly regret deciding to do a tier list on armor sets because I can't do it like that. So anyway, with all of that said, for those of you who've listened, probably in parts, segments, or if you sat and listened the whole way through, what's wrong with you? But also, thank you. Thank you. Another thank you for all of my patrons, for their continued support, especially those at the pillar tier and higher who get these videos a week earlier than everyone else. And thank you also for watching. And just to close it out, obviously this is all subjective, and as I said, I might go back and forth and change my mind on any of the scores, but at the end of it all, I definitely landed on the armor sets that I would have picked at the start, and I'm very happy with that. So I think it's turned out quite nicely, and thanks for watching.